30th, 2025 Planning Commission Workshop minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, turn it over to David, to Aaron. Bill, who wants to start?
Good morning. I'll start. Well, we're really excited to work with you today. I'm here in Falls, as you already know, and I'm here with Bill Grimes. Bill Grimes has over 30 years of experience planning within the region, and was my mentor back in school. And we get to work together now at SCJ, but rarely we get to actually work together on projects. So I was really happy that he had availability to help us through this retreat. So I have we put together a bit of agenda. First, we've made since we last met, we made some tweaks to the community profile update based on your last direction. I was going to go over those kind of real quickly and answer any further questions about that. I think it's in pretty good shape. And David, we were able to sneak in that last bit about the aquifer recharge areas, and I'll present that as well. And then we'd like to give kind of a quick overview presentation about just goals, policies, and actions and the difference between them, just to kind of set the stage for how we like to approach policy frameworks for communities, and to some degree in our own lives. We have a fun example to show that Bill came up with. Then really the work begins, where we start diving into. We'd like to hear from you. Maybe we thought we could break up in maybe 2 to 3 person groups to come up with topics of concern for Kootenai County, for the future of Kootenai County, as a just kind of real starting point for what you think the key issues are. We've got a lot of data we've thrown at you, a lot of it, the existing conditions, the community profile. But we want to hear from you individually, and then kind of report back what those key topics are. And we're going to do a bunch of whiteboarding today over here. And then a little bit of discussion, feedback loop. Then we want to break for lunch, and I think sandwiches are coming about 12:45. And after lunch, we want to kind of take stock again at your existing policies, informed by the topics you identified of concern. And what we'd ultimately like to come to, and in between that, we want to talk about some opportunities, influence, and challenges. We're going to talk about some regional trends and things that may inform future policy updates. But what we'd ultimately like to come to, and we may come back based on the work today, is what are some things that we can or should do now with the comp plan, and what are things that what's our punch list for later? Things that maybe should require a much more robust public process. But we want to understand the things that we can do in the short term versus the things that maybe are a longer term effort with regards to a comp plan update. So part of this is going to kind of understand and hear from you. What policies have you been challenged with when you're faced with rendering a decision on an application or an ordinance? Where are the issues that you struggle? Where could there be some minor surgical tweaks? And so we might get into a little bit of that later this afternoon. But we'd like to come back and fully understand like those targeted surgical areas to focus on for now versus what might be more appropriate through a more robust public process later. But you'll have kind of a punch list, things to kind of focus on later on. Bill, did you have anything to add? Or?
No, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
All right.
And it's great to work with you too.
Yeah, oh, shucks. All right.
This mic wasn't on though, so nobody heard it.
No, that's probably intentional. Okay, so let's go over our recent updates to the community profile. Here's kind of an overview of the things we've changed. We incorporated Sarah's. This is kind of a, well, I'll go over it in a minute. That's aquifer recharge areas. What's the S for again?
Sensitive.
Sensitive aquifer recharge areas. We contacted, I forget who we were directed to contact, but we did and updated kind of the more recent wildfire protection efforts by the county. We included what's called a social vulnerability index. That's kind of a new data, GIS data portal that the CDC put out, and I'll explain why and what that looks like. And it's kind of related to hazard planning, but can be related to other things as well. We incorporated 2022 census data. We've may have done that before when you saw it last time, but in case now there's 2023 census data. But you know, at such time when you're really going through a robust plan, all this stuff can be tweaked, you know, based on most recent data. We redid the kind of existing land use data and map that you have in your existing plan. We struggled with the kind of a little bit of the how that was done, and we produced something we thought might be more useful to you going forward. And then we did a really interesting exercise, growth visualization, kind of looking what growth could look like under existing zoning today. We included budget numbers from the 2025 budget. And that kind of follows the cost of service analysis that we included that was done by done back in 2017 and previously in 2013 for Kootenai County. And then a lot of various other minor tweaks and grammatical fixes. Okay, sensitive aquifer recharge areas. This just came to us yesterday, and we threw it in and gave David a revised community profile. So the copy you have maybe doesn't reflect that one additional page. So these are areas that, so we have the boundary is the Aquifer Protection District. We're not showing the actual whole aquifer. That's also included in the profile. We've, you know, been down that road and have a lot of understanding about that. But what these are areas that are, you know, the more nuanced, sensitive areas within the aquifer, as I understand, where there might be more opportunity for affecting water quality based on a hydrological study that was done or commissioned by the district. So we thought to include that data, and they broke it up into priority levels. And that's based on things like, you know, threats of existing land use around, also how easily the aquifer can be permeated based on the soil types and some other factors as well. So that's just kind of a nice data point to consider. And that could be, you know, that could affect future land use policies, future land use map possibly, or maybe grant applications for sewer connections, that kind of thing.
Aaron, I'd like to interrupt briefly just to give the Plan Commission the context of this. The Aquifer Protection District Board expressly asked me what community development could do to help incorporate this kind of concern that they have into what we do for land use planning. My suggestion is we start with the comprehensive plan because that's broad policy, and then work from there to fine-tune our development code if necessary. But this really, in my view, this really needs to set the stage at the countywide level because, as you see, we have quite a few sensitive areas. The Aquifer Protection District's very concerned about these areas. The report that they had done that creates this data is robust and thorough. And so I'm very confident that what you were seeing on the screen has been scientifically driven. And that's why we're here with this data.
David, do you know why the boundaries of the aquifer seem to have the most the data, you know, like where kind of the topography runs to the prairie? Why do those areas seem to be more studied than kind of the interior of the aquifer boundary? I don't know if you know or not.
My sense of it is all essentially the basin driven in that the watersheds. This, this is the confluence of how water tends to flow, I think.
So runoff essentially is coming
Yes,
into that
yeah.
area, and that's okay.
Right. I think that's, if you were to pull up a graphic that shows watersheds, I think you'd find a correlation.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of recharge along the river there.
No, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. That's what we're concerned with, contamination down there.
David or Aaron, that the boundary that's shown there seems broad for what we normally think about as the aquifer. How new or old is that boundary?
So this is the boundary of the district, not the aquifer.
The
Got
Aquifer Protection District.
Correct.
it. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, that's probably why they're just looking at areas that their district can fund to look at. I presume.
Yes. Right.
So the aquifer still goes farther north of Apple towards Sand Point up there then?
Not so much. It primarily, I can bring up the map if you want, but it primarily, if I remember correctly, it essentially kind of comes out of the lake and
And then flows
goes that way.
into Washington.
Most of the aquifer is in Kootenai County, like 200 miles of it. And it also extends into Washington, etc. So
That's all part of that.
the community profile has a lot more, it's got a couple pages on specific about the aquifer. And then references, there's lots of information out there about the aquifer. We try to keep the profile just
Just a
concise
note,
per topic.
on the map it says North Pole there, that's where I live, but my house is right there. And our well is 410 feet deep there to get to the aquifer, where if you get clear down here, it's down in 100 and some foot deep wells. So down closer to Spokane, so it's quite deep coming out of Ponderay up there.
Yeah, it serves, it's a primary source of water all throughout, in the Spokane Valley, right out of Lake Ponderay. Underground.
Thanks for working this in.
Yeah, you bet.
That's good.
So this is new, you hadn't seen this before. This is the Social Vulnerability Index. I threw this in, it's a project by the CDC, and it's kind of, you can drill down to any county in the country with this data. And they've kind of, but the point of it is to see, okay, if there was a natural disaster, or an earthquake, or a fire, what census tracts would be most vulnerable based on these factors? And they just have it mapped for every county. And I thought, well, let's throw it in. I know that in Washington, because we do work in Washington communities, this is starting to be looked at by grant funders, like for parks, for example. So if you're found to be in a social vulnerable area, you might score higher for an application for a park redevelopment through the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office. So I thought that might be useful to have just in the profile, should it be helpful. And that's kind of what it looks like for Kootenai County. That is what it looks like. So I thought it kind of interesting that over on Post Falls shows the highest vulnerability, along with the Indian reservation, the Coeur d'Alene Indian Reservation as well.
That is interesting.
Okay, and this is a completely rethought existing land use. Our numbers are a little different than what is in the existing plan. What we thought to do was just simply base it on existing lot sizes today, and also carve out public lands, which you can see is a lot of area within. So this is just a sense of how much acreage per, based on the size of parcels currently, which I thought might be useful when you start thinking about new future land use policies and zoning, et cetera. We carved out the cities, we carved out commercial and industrial zone properties within the county. So this is really just an analysis of the county jurisdiction, not the cities as well. We kind of tried to highlight that on the map. They're not included.
I have a suggestion, because I worked with the tribes for 40 years. When you say public lands, I say public and reservation lands. I wouldn't put reservation land under a heading called public. That'll offend the tribe.
Yeah, and that's.
I mean, it's the same number, just say public and reservation land.
Oh, I see.
In the header, they're the bigger.
I see.
Then, yeah, don't include
That's an
the
easy
term
fix.
Matter
reservation.
of diplomacy.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, it's
okay.
just, I know their sensitivities, so.
Yeah. And as we know, it's kind of hard to drill down within a
Well,
tribe.
and you gotta know all these nuances and stuff. It's no problem. I think that would be better from the county standpoint to
Very
call
good.
it public and reservation lands.
Aaron, is that tribally owned land, or is that land within the tribal jurisdiction?
Just within the reservation boundaries.
But tribally owned land in the reservation boundaries, or?
Some of it. Some of it's fee, some of it's fee, some of it's trust. It's just the reservation
Yeah,
boundaries.
there's different kinds of reservation lands. Like I said, I just don't wanna have something that, it sounds maybe foolish to a non-tribal person, but to them it
Yeah,
means.
no, I appreciate
It's their
that.
place, it's not public.
It's such a checkerboard, and depending on whether a tribal member owns it, and it's kind of a moving target, for simplicity's sake, I just kind of carved out. We could show public lands, and we could just show reservation land. Just break it out as a separate.
That would be fine too, just
Okay.
anything like that, just so it doesn't look like we're referring to their lands as public lands.
We tried in a previous effort to understand what is under trust, what is under fee, and it's not,
Convoluted.
to get a real accurate, confident display is really challenging.
That's all just everything inside the reservation boundaries.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, actually, I think maybe,
Yeah, I like the breakout idea.
Yeah.
If you're all right, let's do that.
absolutely. Yeah, that's not hard to do at all. Okay. The next thing we did, and this kind of gets really interesting. I'd love your feedback on it. In talking to David, we came up with the idea to come up with a visualization scenario, right? What could growth look like someday under existing standards? This is what it looks like today. And these are address points through GIS that I think is primarily used by emergency response, right? So they know, this is a unit or this is a business address, et cetera. So, and we did we plugged it into our GIS system and provided a 3D rendering of it. And then we said, okay, if we cut out public lands and we cut out some other constraints like steep slopes, 40% or more, assume those won't get developed, there's other constraints too that could apply, such as, maybe wetlands or, there's market factors that we didn't consider. We just thought, okay, under the county's existing zoning, and we took in consideration the aquifer new standards, what's max build out? If, and this might not be 20 years, this could be 50 or 100 years, who knows? But what is the max build out potential under, with just those couple of constraints taken into consideration, public lands and steep slopes. And this is what we came up with.
Does that take, is that just going laterally, or is it also potential for, vertically? So, instead of single-family homes, it's apartment buildings.
No, and it really was just limited to the county
Yeah, then
jurisdiction.
cities.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it assumes, okay, everybody's going to carve up their lot to the minimum lot size, and build, to the, whatever, 1 unit per that lot. But again, doesn't take in, I have some notes here, water availability, septic availability, access constraints, market factors, et cetera. We didn't consider any of that. We only considered steep slopes and where public lands are.
And it probably wouldn't also include accessory dwelling units or.
I don't believe no.
Right, so you really have to take this as a visualization of the overall impact, but.
Yeah.
It could be greater than
It
this.
could actually be,
It could.
ultimately, it could be 2 times greater.
Yeah.
Because every lot has, depending on which zoning you're in, you could have duplex and accessory dwelling, and even
But if you're over the aquifer, of course.
it's limited.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just to give you a feel.
Do we have a sense, Aaron, of what might be happening north in the Bonner County space? I mean, is their zoning similar to Kootenai County's and creating a continuation of that trend north of that county line?
I'm going to say generally yes, if not more. That may change soon. There's been a shakeup politically a bit in the county.
The one thing that is different in Bonner, they've got a reverse zoning. Their highest density is not around the lakes. Ours is.
Right. It's not so much zoning, it's mostly the amount of public land around the lake.
And their subdivision regs, they limit access around the lakes so that the larger lots have to be on the lakes. The smaller lots are further away from the lakes.
Not sure that's so true anymore.
Last night I talked to the planning staff, what was left of them.
Well, as you
When was this?
mentioned, you've got, I mean, all around Coeur d'Alene Lake and Hayden too is all National Forest System lands. And so, you can't spread any further than just the shoreline, basically.
But if you look on our zoning map over there, all that high yellow,
Yeah,
that's the most dense zoning we have.
yeah.
And that's right around the lakes.
Oh, well, yeah, right up to the boundary of the forest, well, in many
so that's-
cases,
I mean, that's
yeah.
where you get 8,240 square foot lots,
Right.
which to me is always backwards. It should have been the reverse.
Except nobody could afford a 5-acre lot on the lake.
Well, but you get solution with that approach.
Oh, yes, no question about it.
Okay, so that's really it for the major updates of the most recent community profile, except for
Aaron?
Sarah's, which will come to you.
I do have a question. The left, I would say the west edge of that illustration, how much, is that where the county ends, or is that just where the illustration ends?
The county, it's just the illustration. It's just one view. I mean, we can put the camera anywhere, but this is the county
That's the line.
Okay,
property here, so.
got it.
I know that basically if a city wants to annex a portion of the county into the, you guys don't hardly have any say hardly with that, but I mean, but
Mostly they just do it.
they just do it, yeah.
But
So,
that's a discussion I'd like to have with this group.
okay, because,
All the ACIs right now are being updated with all the cities.
oh,
To
yeah,
me, this is the perfect time to broach the city councils and say, are you the least bit interested in carving out some open areas or setting some boundary lines for the maximum extent your city's going to grow so that we don't have property line to property line, rooftop to rooftop?
with no public facilities, parks or
Or anything
areas
else.
or anything, just
Right.
house after house after house after house. I think I think
Yeah.
it's time to do that. I agree with that, yeah.
Okay, anything further on existing conditions today? Okay, should we start talking about the future? Okay, we just kind of want to go over what's a goal, what's a policy, what's an action, just to kind of set the stage for the differences between them. And here's a diagram that Bill came up with at one point that I've been using a lot. Bill, do you want to kind of go over this a little bit?
Sure.
I get tired of hearing myself talk. I don't know
no,
what other people do.
I'm happy to. Thank you very much.
All right, is the green light on?
It's, the green light's on. So I'm kind of a policy nerd, and it's well earned after doing this for 30 or so years. But when we look at structuring a comprehensive plan, and I don't know how much of this you've already had in your conversations, but what we try to do is we try to make sure that we have a reasonable projection between what we have as a long-term vision, and then how we express that in terms of goals, which are statements of an end state at the end of the planning horizon, say 20 years from now. And then we have a bank of policies that we use as behavior guidance, so that if we're acting in conformance with those policies, we will achieve those goals. And then the next tier are the implementation actions, which are the assignable, budgetable, completable, trackable things that we do to implement those policies to achieve those goals. So there's a real structure that we try to superimpose on policy, so that we have that kind of continuity and reasonable relationship between what we're expressing as our vision, or really our key legislative intent, and then what we do with each of our decisions to get there. And so whether it's a zone change, or an annual budget, or a capital facility investment, or an agreement we have with another jurisdiction that we adopt, it's something that clearly is related to a policy, which in turn is related to a goal, which helps us achieve our vision for 20 years. So I'm actually going to kick off something here on the whiteboard. I sat there purposely so I could jog during the course of this meeting. But we're working more in the world of the abstract when we're talking about our vision, and then we're more in the world of the concrete when we're looking at our annual work assignments or day-to-day things that we do to implement the plan. So let me see if I can do this right. So we have I actually did it backwards, but I'll do it. I'll catch up. So the level of detail here is actually quite small when we're looking at our vision. We're kind of arm waving. We're trying to get this more abstracted sense of direction, where we want to head in the long term, where we want to be 20 years from now. But by the time we get to our action items, down here, our detail is actually quite high. We're going to adopt zoning to modify our height restrictions in such and such a zone. We're going to develop an interlocal agreement with the city of Kootenai to achieve blah, 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 blah. So it's very action-oriented, it's very specific. The level of consensus kind of moves in a different direction, where the level of consensus is actually quite high in this abstract level. It's apple pie, hot dogs, well, maybe not hot dogs. that kind of verges on less consensus. But still, when we're talking about our vision and our goals, we're generally really finding a great deal of agreement. But when it comes time to the actual actions we take, people will squabble. Well, maybe we don't do that first. Or this kind of a zoning change might not be appropriate. So what we need to do with our policy framework is to make sure that we build it on a great deal of consensus when it comes to our more abstract stuff. And then we use our policy conversation to navigate that translation between the area of full agreement to make our disagreement easier to manage. And that kind of a policy framework and that hierarchy is really essential to help us get there. Because we know every budget cycle
we're going to be facing a debate over what we do first or how much we spend on something. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to really partition that disagreement into the detail of the plan, rather than trying to undermine the policy and vision foundation upon which the entire plan is based. So if we have a good policy framework, and we can really underscore that relationship between how each action implements the policy to achieve a goal, it helps us really put sideboards on the debate we have about each individual action. So that's one of the things that's really important. And so, you know, Aaron and I, in the course of our conversation today with you, will be talking about how we structure this stuff so that we get a good goal and we get a good policy that's tied to it, and that helps populate our work programs for the individual action items for the years to come. So you'll see us in our heads as we're kind of spinning around inside how we're able to partition these different tensions between abstract, concrete, consensus and argument, and specificity and vagueness, so that we can get a nice progressive instrument for you to use. You know, and if it's done right, it'll make the board's job easier. It'll make your budget writers easier. It'll make your jobs easier. It'll make your department head jobs easier. And also, it gives you an opportunity, if you are able to create this kind of a vision and have it just really hit that sweet spot when it's time to update your plan, you'll be able to take a look at this and say, so what are our community priorities? What are our community values? And what are our environmental influences? And to what degree have they changed since the last time we wrote the plan? And if they haven't changed that much, then you can move right into your more specific policy conversation.
So we did come up with a couple of quick examples. Here's Bill's example. You know, we didn't put up a vision. So I would say if we back up and say the vision, maybe it would be Bill has a high quality of life. One goal is that he can provide for his family. The policy to do that is that he remains employed. And the action is to set his alarm clock. Here's a recent examthis
Which was successful, by the way.
He's here. He made it. This is a recent example I'm working on for a North Idaho community. Small town characters preserved in the hands. One of the policies under that is that new development within neighborhoods should not be abruptly out of scale from existing homes, right? We can all probably relate to that one. Now, what's the action item? Adopt a height plane standard. A height plane is where you might have a height in the zone that goes up to 30 feet or something. There's an existing home that's maybe 1 story, but boy, if you just built right to that height, it's not going to integrate well with the existing neighborhood. So a height plane, and Coeur d'Alene has this in some of their development codes. You have to build to this plane, right, so that you preserve some of the light and air, and it's not abruptly out of scale, and privacy, and you're not shrouded in darkness for half the day because of that development. So that's a very specific action that meets this. That is just one action of one policy of the goal of preserving small town character. Okay. You guys ready to get up and do some work?
I do have another example.
Okay, let's hear it.
I do have another example.
I was just coming up with this one this morning, trying to think of something that's maybe more related to a county or regional planning conversation. And so, and this may sound somewhat familiar to you, because you're probably looking at policies and programs kind of like this. But maybe one goal is is to have a thriving agricultural economy. Okay, so that's a reasonable goal. So you have that kind of economic diversity, and it creates this continued sense of productive open space and economic benefit. And so that maybe you have a policy that says support farmland preservation. Okay, so everybody wants a thriving agricultural economy. Most people can get behind supporting farmland preservation. Maybe not everybody, but maybe enough for it to be policy direction for the community. So what are you going to do about that? Well, let's see. We're going to study property tax incentives. That is an action. You can assign that to somebody in your assessor's office. Another one is to adopt interlocal agreements in your areas of impact with cities. Came up already today. How do you maybe get into the mix of potential farmland conservation? Another one is to adopt more flexible land use standards in your ag districts. If you're going to compel people to keep their land, give them a little bit more opportunity to do different stuff with it. And then maybe you have another action, which is create a farmland trust program. And all of these things are assignable, they're budgetable, and they're completable actions. Okay, and so maybe another policy that comes out of this is to promote value-added economy. Thriving agricultural economy, it's not just about producing and exporting, maybe it's about producing and processing and selling. If you get a little bit more economic diversity, some momentum built around that.
I got one for an action. Moratorium on data centers.
Moratorium on what?
Data centers.
Okay, so maybe an action here is to develop an economic strategy. So you have a sense of what's possible, right? And then you have adopt flexible land use standards in ag districts. And what's really what gets my boat floated in this kind of a conversation is that now we see we have an action that satisfies two different policy directives. And so you can start to really prioritize what you're going to do, so you have one stone feeding two birds, or whatever. But yeah, this kind of hierarchical structure can also provide some autonomies in what you do and prioritize what's most important for what you want to do to satisfy multiple policy directions with a single initiative.
He said he was a nerd. Okay, we'd like to break off into some topics of concern. But I was thinking, it's always good to kind of start with visioning. And let me know what you think about. I like to ask 3 questions at the onset of any comp plan. We're not going full bore with the comp plan at this point, as we know, right? And we want to make sure that we incorporate a robust public process to do that. But before we ask about what the topics of concern are, I wonder if it might be worth asking the first two questions that I always like to ask. And the first one is, if you were at Thanksgiving dinner at a relative's house on the other side of the country somewhere who've never been to Kootenai County, and they ask you, what's it like in Kootenai County? And so that's the first question. How would you describe Kootenai County today? Then the second question is, 20 years later, if you're at that same dinner table, how would you like to describe Kootenai County 20 years from now? And then the third question is something I was thinking that we kind of break off in, is what's in the way of getting there? What opportunities and challenges are ahead? What are the topics of concern? And that's really what we wanted to drive at, but I thought, you know, maybe the first two questions we could try to answer. Does that sound okay?
Go for it.
So can I erase this now? Okay. Okay, Thanksgiving dinner. Somewhere maybe on the East Coast or, Canada, Europe, whatever.
We're gonna have eggs.
More money than I do.
Duck eggs. I have three topics that are on my mind constantly, being an engineer and also managing drinking water. The first one is to protect the source of drinking water, which is the aquifer, whatever that takes. That's one. The second one is the one that he was talking about. If we don't control the annexation of all of the open county land to the cities, the county has really no control over actually protecting the aquifer or any other issue. And then the final one for me is the movement of traffic. I mean, now, we depend upon ITD for the federal and state highways, but we've got all of our highway districts, and those guys are widening roads and paving gravel roads, and they're doing everything they can to stay on top of it. But I've got semi trucks getting off the off ramp at Silverwood, coming by my house on a county road, going down Diagonal Road and heading into Spokane to hit, one of the roads that takes them down to Interstate 90 and bypass the scales. I mean, great big semis that are driving down the county roads to get around 95 and whatever else. And so you've got all the impact on highway districts out there with these big trucks. And of course, they've got their load limits on the roads out there now already because of the thawing. They're already put load limits on the county roads.
So those are great thoughts. Hold on to those thoughts.
Pardon?
Hold on to those thoughts.
Okay.
And let's talk about those in small groups.
Okay.
Let's first ask the question, how would you describe Kootenai County today? Good or bad? Things you love about it, things that are challenging. What are just some quick things that come to mind?
Well, I'm in agreement with all Terry talked about, but going to the Thanksgiving dinner, I would tell them how awful it is to live here because I don't want them to come.
I can see that. Growth management.
Yeah, topic of concern. I
Yeah.
think we're going to hear that a lot.
Yeah.
But how would you describe it today?
Okay. One of the number one things is how friendly people are. And it's such a beautiful place to live. It used to be economically good, but is no longer. And like my husband and I, we really enjoy the bike trails. So that's something that I find wonderful here, or all the bike trails, the rails to trails. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Political mess.
Political mess. No tackling today. Sorry. What else?
Dovetailing on the trails, I think it's just the outdoor lifestyle in many different, the fishing, the hunting, the skiing, the snowmobiling. I mean, it's year-round outdoor type of lifestyle.
Okay. Hunting. Those kind of things.
Skiing, yeah. You've got all kinds of,
So, outdoor recreation.
yeah.
Okay? Anything else? Good or bad?
Lack of infrastructure.
What's that?
Lack of infrastructure.
Infrastructure. Any in particular?
Can you be more specific?
Constant construction and nowhere to go with it. I mean, they're trying to build out, but
Transportation infrastructure?
yeah.
Anything else jumping out at you?
You know, I moved here in 52 and lived here through high school and grade school and grew up here and went on to the University of Idaho and then worked all over the United States. I mean, some towns, 4 million people in the town, but there's been a change in people's concern for others. I think that, I mean, I've got people out of my subdivision that are lighting fires during fire season without any care for whether they're going to burn the whole prairie down, and things like that. And I don't know whether it's ignorance on their part or they just flat don't give a darn about anybody else. Shooting their guns off and wounding the neighbors' horses, stuff like that, So, but that's a people thing. It's not
Sort of a reduced social awareness?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's a good there. Reduce social awareness for others' needs, I think.
Just lack of social awareness?
Yeah. Pardon me. Go ahead. Yeah. I mean, it has changed.
Okay. We can come back if anybody has any more. So, 20 years from now, you're back at that same Thanksgiving dinner. How would you like to describe it?
I'd just like to be here and be able to describe it.
What was that? What was that?
I'd like to still be here and be able to describe it.
So, like cost of living? Or you just mean like...
I'd like to still be here.
Or you'd like to be here in 20 years.
Yeah.
I'll be over 100 years old.
Well, hopefully it's still friendly, still beautiful, still have the outdoor opportunities and trails and
Okay.
I would hope that it becomes more economically feasible for people to live here, especially, like a lot of what I hear are locals who've lived here all their life, and now their kids can't afford to live here.
Like that. So, those who grow up here be able to stay.
Mm-hmm. And buy a house and...
Attainable housing.
Well, I wouldn't put it that way.
No?
No. You can look at it. You can look at it two ways: of bringing down housing prices, which is one way, or making houses smaller, cheaper, or whatever. Or you can bring in opportunities to raise people's incomes. So there's two ways, and maybe both of those.
Yeah.
Right? The thing I think we all realize is that COVID threw us for a loop, and we're still recovering.
Yes. Okay, anything else, 20 years?
One of the, going back to being concerned about neighbors and others and all that kind of stuff, and I've lived in every kind of a community in the United States you can think of, but we need to have a balanced approach so that, and I don't know if that'll ever happen in Idaho, where the regulating and rules and regulations go so far overboard to try to get people to behave themselves that you get in. I mean, I'll give you an example. In Fairfax County, Virginia, I couldn't paint the door on my house without getting permission from the county as to the color I was going to paint the door. I mean, that's getting ridiculous. That's what I'm saying. We don't want to go clear to that point where, you got to put a fur coat on your horse in the wintertime because it'll get cold. Those are regulations in those places with all those people. So I'm saying a balanced approach to regulating behaviors that isn't so onerous that it's stupid or is so loose that everybody is hurting everybody else with their behavior. I don't know how that's all of our responsibilities here. So.
Balanced regulations?
Yeah, balanced regulation. So they don't end up to the point, like I say, you gotta get permission to paint the door on my house. I mean, that was crazy. I couldn't believe it. I violated it and got a ticket for.
Is that an HOA?
Yeah, for painting my door red.
What about the lake? We talked about the lake in the past a lot.
Yeah.
20 years from now, the lake.
Well,
this is what you would like to say about the lake.
Yeah, like say 20 years later, you'd like to describe Kootenai County as what? From now?
20 years from now, it'll be like the national parks. You'll probably have to get a permit and a time to get on it. You have to get reservations to get on it.
So you would say that you would like the county or the reservation system not to have that, is what you would like to say about this 20 years from now.
Yeah.
So open access, accessible lake.
That it's still beautiful and maybe even in better shape.
Clean water.
Yeah.
Lake access preserved or enhanced.
yeah. If you want that, you better protect the water quality in all of our bodies of water, the lakes. In 20 years, I would hope that we would be at least where we are now or better. How much longer can we tolerate Fernan the way it is? You see, that's what I'm saying. And if we're not careful, Coeur d'Alene Lake will be like Fernan.
Okay.
And that may be surface water and groundwater.
Well, the groundwater is but the surface water is really affected by development because of the runoff, from
surface and ground.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, we want to have the aquifer in good shape. Yeah, right. I mean, there's no question about that. But the surface waters in these, that's one of the reasons why people come here is these big bodies of water, lakes and stuff. So.
Okay. Anything else? We want to certainly get into things we can do. that's kind of what we're going to start leading towards. Okay, very good. So, do you guys feel comfortable just splitting off right down the middle of the table here, 3 and 3? Would that work? Okay. Why don't you guys kind of maybe move towards Bill here on this side, and you folks can kind of be with David.
No, I need a little potty break.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I could use it too, actually. Let's take a minute and then take a beat, and then come into small groups and treats.
He's a senior executive like I was, and get another 40 or 50,000. Maybe. Well, yeah, maybe until I won't have a retirement. I don't. Well, that. So, I said, do I have my person?
Yeah.
Goodness, I got 3 retirements. Yeah, it's scary. There's that. Like I served in a firefighting too. They had a lot of people that have to be on that when the wars was happening. When I heard some wild firefighters. That's the great idea. Some of those guys were smoke jumpers, so they have a whole lot of experience. They just work 6 months a year and they don't get that kind of training. But yeah, I think people gotta get to jump out of an airplane. I know.
Well, I just wanted to get together. Okay. It's good to see you.
We need getting to you, so to stretch it out a little bit. Yeah, just, some days are good and some days are just not. Today's that's the key. When you said you were God is the savior for my.
That'll be good to hear how it goes.
Yeah, I have a bike that I have on, I think we call it a trainer.
Oh, yeah,
In our
yeah.
basement.
Mhm.
No, I think so.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Yeah,
Every day, I'm on
a
it.
few minutes of that, even if it's not a full hour or whatever, just sometimes. I've been going to a spin class. And yeah, I've been going for, I think I might be a little overdoing it, but I think I'd rather over than under.
So, yeah.
Because there's a fine line.
Yeah, it's finding that balance.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what are the various challenges, activities to get there?
Yeah. So we
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But you can see the.
Well, no, it's got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
I never did very well with garden because I go out and pick stuff for dinner and for green beans, peas, sometimes more.
Really?
Over here, so we can have our little conflict.
Oh, yeah, and then I can put, yeah, that's great.
So when did you get back from your trip? I don't remember now. Yeah. So you were there for just vacation, travel, and. What is the time difference?
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's then we keep from there to Shawea, which is right on the edge of the freeway. And then got on this ship, yeah, spent 2 days crossing the path, just waiting for the next one. Toured around, and then on the ship, and twice a day we get on. And go on kayaks or nothing.
Today to tomorrow, right? Topics of concern. What are things that really are going to lead to those revised goals, policies, and actions? Which we're going to talk about after we get through. We really drill down and identify what the real topics of concern that you have kind of fed by this, from today, 20 years plus out tomorrow. All right, so let's get close. Maybe in
You're right here.
follow around.
So David, we spent some time thinking about our hopes for 2045, and then some of those things that we think we need to really address
Yes.
to make those happen.
Yeah. You have some good stuff.
Well, to start out with,
So
course.
where's our list?
I don't know, public drinking water system.
Run through that list and see.
Anything could happen where we
I think that's already changed. I've noticed a change from
I had to set
the
up
last
drinking
9
water system.
years.
Yeah, I think. July, you know,
It happens.
family,
Although
You
there's
can't
still,
clean it up, then you gotta drink the water.
there is, you have to take effort
the water that goes to the cities and the people that have development out there, they're just drinking raw water.
Services, like we get our
So we don't want to get to where we've got chlorine.
rotated at,
We need to
the
protect it.
Schwab
So
and,
that's, that's the first thing.
hospital
It
staff.
is a wonderful resource for the people of this area.
For the most part, services are
So
still,
wells at risk.
still pretty friendly.
Yeah, it's just the
Pretty
groundwater
accommodating.
in the
Recently had to
aquifer.
go into,
And we've done all, we've got, you know, I 5 acre rule, and this is proper storage chemicals on,
Well, piggybacking on your
And
idea,
yeah,
if we develop
they-
one of your
the
graphic
gals
shows,
just,
at what point do we hear it hit a density?
now we're
where
going
the water
to be in
quality?
LA.
well,
Yeah.
the water quality will suffer
Yeah.
for 2 reasons.
So-
One, if you pump the sucker dry.
It has
Because
changed.
you're using so much. The other one is if you continue to allow
It's
septic
still
tanks and drain
there.
fields over the aquifer.
Exactly.
And I think it
Even
all,
at the 5 acres.
Even at the 5 acres.
And then a health test concern.
Right,
I-
and we've had some proposals out where I live out there to build a new subdivision and put in a sewage collection system, and then have partial treatment, and then
I
have
think the more
sprinkler,
dense
yeah,
we
sprinkler
are, the
irrigation
more
on
we're
an
growing
area.
up against
And I-
each
I
other.
had something like that at Clark, 50 years ago for the Forest Service.
Same
It
That
works,
paved
but how big?
Yes.
You know,
Like
so
parties.
it's
Trees up
sewering,
there off the land.
You know,
Unless you're trying.
you know, it's sewering.
oh, really, you got one
Pulled
right?
right in.
Basically, eventually
You
sewering,
probably
the-
like my husband, he has,
you know, any developments of less than 5 acre lots needed a sewer and have a sewer treatment
it
plant.
just astounds me.
Yeah, discharge to the Coeur d'Alene
Yeah,
or
so
Spokane
I-
or
And
someplace.
that's what the current
Again, I go back to
Right,
ordinance,
COVID, what happened to it?
but what he's talking about is that we,
except for certain,
We got slammed, it's like
There are
perfect
exemptions,
storm.
but otherwise 5 acres will apply over.
Housing prices
My concern is
More
that
people
level
would come
here,
Are-
because they keep developing it, so you need for 5
Yes.
acre lots, like he
Yeah,
says,
and
you can
so
get to
our
the saturation
population
point.
estimated our
So
housing
are we gonna,
prices.
is the county in the future
do
somehow gonna say, with a new subdivision, where you guys can't have septic tanks and drain fields in your
Our
subdivision?
resources
You gotta set,
were,
Package plan.
they put a package plan in, there's all kinds of engineered package plans.
you know, it's like, when
We
we
need
first
to
moved
be
here,
thinking about that, we just can't
and we
keep
went to DMV.
developing more and more 5 acre lots of septic tanks
You
and
walked
drain
in,
fields.
I think there was somebody available to come to you and say,
We can't,
the cows, we can't afford that.
Well,
And
but-
sometimes we have to do that.
There's a reverse issue too. We as a society can't
There was
afford,
no wait.
because it
Now,
takes sheriff's
you have to make
deputies
an
and
appointment.
emergency,
So,
all that costs money,
you
and at
know,
the
all
moment,
that, going
most
back
people don't
to
realize
friendliness, all
residential
that
development has
impacts
never
friendliness.
paid its way,
Right.
ever.
So,
Well, it's just like when we're building these developments,
through
private
policy,
residences up in the
we can
mountains, and
slow
they put
the
in a
growth.
road that is 15 feet wide,
so that we
with
can catch
switchbacks
our
in it.
breath,
And we see it every day
our
when we walk, especially
resources
in the winter,
can
trying
catch up
to, I
to
can't get up to my road,
the
to my
demand.
house in the winter, it's
Because
got to
right
go up the
now,
hill or torn down because it's
My
all the
system
thing.
is that
And
it's,
Yeah.
it's always behind the
you should
curve
notice
with
that, you know.
the demand
I've
for our
got two-wheel drive
resources
car, and thinking,
now.
Yeah.
So if we can just, if we can, and I don't mean,
So-
you know,
so
forever,
eventually
because
we're
there will
going to
always
have
be
to
development.
require
If we can just slow that down a bit
protect the
to
aquifer.
let us catch up.
Now,
That
the
would-
transportation situation is,
And of course,
we got some pretty good road districts in
protecting
there,
our,
staying on
big
top.
on that.
And I'm out at 5 o'clock in the morning, plowing my road, and here comes the county. The county highway district.
And waves
down.
Yeah.
But the highway districts will
Pretty
tell you,
common.
it could be metropolitan, is that we got $2.3 billion worth of new infrastructure needs to be done
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
keep
and once
transportation
the
where
more
it's at
conservative.
today. And there is,
Allow
separate out the federal funding for that, which is 80%.
shoot for that.
We have no local match,
No,
none.
$2.1 billion.
2.1, 2.3.
curious to see, but
And we can check with
I don't think
Yeah,
that
Dr.
now
Bob.
that COVID is over,
And that's to
I
2045?
don't think people have gone,
Yeah.
okay, let's go back to California.
So
think I know that.
That's right. Yeah, you take the, because they're constantly.
Because it is pretty great here.
And the takeaway is we don't have time even to
Thought
do
about more
that.
people
And the
competing
people in
the
the
same
most of the people in Idaho
resource
realize
designed to serve a smaller
for every dollar
Yes.
they send to Washington DC, they
It
give
was almost like
more than that back.
we're not ready
If
for
the
what we
federal
were.
government continues with its grants.
So it throws all, who would have
Like
expected?
administration and the like. But if we get an administration in Washington that says we're not gonna fund any
Your comment about
then
housing
we're gonna let the
affordability
states or the local people try to fund
Yeah,
it.
there's an opportunity perhaps to have strategies. to
Right
reduce
now,
housing, but how do you also empower more people to enter the market?
engineering firms. are
So
out
maybe
there all
kind of
the
the same
time.
thing on readiness.
And they're all
Along the
sitting
road.
waiting to see what's gonna happen.
Yes.
All of this
And
money,
invest in
programs they have planned for
what we
this
need to
infrastructure.
invest in.
They don't know whether they're gonna
Job
get
opportunities,
the
is
federal
that what
funding
you're
now,
looking
this is
more
administration
business?
building in that.
Is that what you were?
So that's the,
Or,
Well, the thing is, if they get.
preparing our kids
They're.
enter the workforce.
well, that's another, well, of course, that's another problem.
In
We don't
jobs that
educate our next
pay,
generation.
pay better than
But
just
so the transportation situation and the treatment of the
cleaning
of
houses.
waste materials is
You know,
really important.
and the thing is,
So
no, I'm not saying, I'm not necessarily saying, oh, they should all be,
Or concurrent.
more,
Or at
or
least
concurrent AI experts, you know, that's the way to say.
You can never catch up.
Because we should, train, should learners,
If you tie all that in.
electricians, those trades also provide a real good
Depending on how
income.
the fire season's going.
It's hard to get those people. You have to, unless you know or a personal friend, which is kind of the route we've been going, but even our personal friends who are like that say, I'm too busy, call this person. And it's difficulty
Because if we
to
have
try to
that fire
get more
season.
service right away.
So
That all
Not the same erosion issues.
It's the same erosion.
provide more
I mean, it's
training
all
for
Trade school,
trade schools.
Around here,
that's
my
what I'm-
experience is, I used to sell timber sales
and
to the forest.
and helping our
Like
kids
millions of board feet of the same.
go that way.
It takes about 30 years for you to have a new stand of timber.
Well, I got a lot of things to say, but I don't- one thing is we need to keep in perspective what our parameters are as a planning and zoning. And we look at what our parameters are, what our authority is in planning and zoning. that-
My trees out there that I planted, trees big around, I
That
planted
has nothing to do
in
with,
2003.
or shouldn't anyway, with controlling the cost.
But I'm
of
husbanding
business.
Taking care of
Very
it
limited.
more than you would out in the
What we
woods.
can do
Well, that's
is
not in the woods,
planning and
it's
zoning.
natural and.
And culture is another one, we all agree.
Yeah,
culture is
it depends on what kind of
problem.
But I mean, I don't know what-
Planning and zoning, how to affect culture.
It all runs together.
I got emails, I get emails and reports from Washington DC every day. I get
Policies to slow the growth.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
And I think that makes we should be more prepared for growth. We should be, our job should be to prepare for growth, which is what you said.
They can't hire anyone.
Not
So
to.
yet this year. So I don't know what's,
Well, they're talking about the ones they do.
9 years ago when I started this,
that'd be what?
there was a distinction made between, that should be in my opinion, between
So there's that, but
Non-experience.
planning growth.
now, I also talk about transportation,
We're
I talk
assuming
about
that
the
it's gonna,
surface water.
things are gonna grow. And you said it earlier over here, you want the kids to grow up and stay. That's growth. If we each do our
There's
2.5
decisions
kids
that need to be
per
made.
couple, we're gonna experience growth. Let's keep it
I
there.
mean, my
I agree with you
solution to the
100%.
problem on the east side of Kootenai is to make all those people pay for the sewer line that goes through
So
there.
the kids can stay here. That generally means something like manufacturing.
Up to Highway 97, bury the thing in Idaho.
We've seen over the course of my 50 years of
That's what it takes.
adulthood,
Don't kid
people
yourself.
don't like manufacturing, they want the industry, they want the AI, they want the computer, they don't want the sawmill, they don't
And
want
they're probably using
the
the
aluminum plants, they don't want anything that might make that
Now,
steam
I've got
cloud.
friends that live around, this and what they've done,
But that's what money is.
3 or 4 people.
Mining is what it is.
Taken,
Sawmilling
their
is
septic
these
tanks. They bored a hole under Highway 97, they all.
So I think the idea of the policy would be great
And
to
they
encourage
encourage mound up there, and they pump
Certainly, I think,
out there, they treat it properly, because they
care.
I think really well manufacturing something.
That's the problem. Yeah, thousands of dollars to do that, and most of them are hand, so, that's
People
no
who are more inclined to
on
the
the west
trades
side,
and
certainly like some of the new subdivisions, there you have lawsuits running into ditch lines, and so
programmer,
talk to our.
I'm all for the trades, and that's the other side of our
You've seen raw sewage running in the ditch down there.
purview, I guess.
So there's, it's.
But those are problems they could do,
Writing comprehensive plan.
just by saying
But
that's
you
not
gotta
acceptable.
you gotta have the gumption to do it.
Yes.
You know.
That's a given.
And the other thing is, like I said, they don't wanna be, where I live, the future acres, communities where you can't make the door. I mean, stupid stuff like that, and see, so we don't wanna go just completely day-to-day that way. So that's why we need this balance. But I've
But health and
got
safety.
some really good neighbors in my subdivision, and I got other neighbors, they get drunk, and they go on their back porch and they shoot semi-automatic weapons into the woods behind their house. I mean, it sounds like a battlefield in Vietnam. I mean, these fire indiscriminate shooting, I mean, and they don't seem to care about my about their neighbors. And I've called the sheriff's department, they won't even come out.
How do we interpret
Stop it.
broader community value?
No, I've got a couple of guys that used to be police officers in Southern California, and they really got one of those guys packs a gun for one of them got his horse shot.
Might not get traction.
But he told me that if he could find out who did it, he'd go shoot him. Now, if you go up to their house and shoot them, that's the clock. Yeah, it is, but it's an uncivil, but see, if you don't have some kind of rule enforcement against that kind of behavior, then what happens? But my son.
That's why people are moving to North
That's
Idaho.
great, because they were all part of
They're coming here because they're tired of all the rules.
Right.
impact.
I mean, I would not live in a subdivision anywhere.
Former life.
That is going to tell me I can't pick my
On
nose.
this commission,
I can't see something. I'm
concern
not
open
going
space,
to
like we mentioned.
anywhere that's got nature way.
Should have enough
it
open
ain't
space
gonna
for
happen.
recreation.
That's why we gotta.
That's a choice you have to make.
It's already, that's the recreation
We have to
commission,
decide what is
right?
important.
So even that's, even that is a qualifier.
Sewer,
So
Clean
it's
water.
all something that we
clean water,
want. It's all something that is important, but when it
what
comes to
is
this
important,
commission,
what color
do
is it?
something about it. We have to turn and say, we don't think it works as a recreation commission.
We
And we got very little response from them, to be honest.
The county has a
This
permit,
whole
or maybe the
situation is
just
coming down to their.
That's our Parks Department. Property runs
I'll
it.
get excited.
There's no common sense.
And we got no,
And that's why
most of the people will be there from them.
when I moved here in the.
But it's, to me, it's a tough one because
Well, there's very
That's the
little, they
same
actually
right
have
across the
very
border as it is.
little acreage.
Because it's
I want to say it's like
pretty much
less than
as
100
long
acres
as you got some
of open
sense
land
of
is
it's
underneath that department.
Come here and
But
do
that
what you
department
want
also
to do.
takes care of the noxious
And
weeds, those kinds of things.
As long as you do that, you're
It's
gonna.
no plowing. So
I
it's a
live
very
on a private
technical
road
zone
and the
here,
other
if I'm
pieces of property.
remembering correctly.
And
So,
7
county,
residents,
you know,
I got written
I
in.
think county water,
Yes,
You know, we all hear.
in most cases, you're gonna have good
correct me
neighbors,
if I'm wrong,
but every once in a while you get a
for
ringer.
our county-wide acreage to have less than
You
100
know, I
acres
mean,
of open
out
land.
where I am,
It's
the
very
guy,
small.
yeah, 10 acres, he lives in Nevada.
And,
So
but
he
then
built a
bump
bunch
up to what
trailer
George was
pads
talking about, which we have as
For
a
travel
choice.
trailers, you let people
Locally,
live
my
in
area
travel
has
trailers,
been
you just
a
open the
And
tank,
the
dump
cities
it on the
just coming in
prairie.
and annexing.
So I got a hold of the county and I turned it into the county and they were forced against them, put a stop to that, you know.
50 acres and they're gonna build
So where we
who
at?
knows how many homes on it,
You know,
then there goes
creators,
that
we got good creators,
opportunity.
we want
Right, so,
But,
work,
We was.
is there public land, federal statute, or is it state, or what allows the city to come in and annex something from influence that? Is there something that a county can do to
again, the
like stop
trails
that?
on public lands.
Well, But
I think
is
it's
there
state, it has to
something
be, have
that,
to change it at the state level. Because
right
right
now,
now,
is it federal, state, is it?
I believe it's state, because I actually talked to one of the commissioners, a couple of commissioners about this. And dealing with what I was dealing with in my area, and my understanding, this was a few years ago, so I have to be caught up on it, is the cities cannot go after that. The property owners have to go to the individual city and request
Well,
the city and annex their property. And then
no,
there's a
the federal
process for
campgrounds are not managed by
and to then remove
government
it from
employees.
other county jurisdictions.
Those are all
city
concessionaires
jurisdictions.
and contracts.
But it's
Every
also
single
my understanding that if that's the
campground,
process,
actual
that the
board,
county can't hinder that
private.
in the way they have
It's
this.
fire.
So you go there from 5 acre parcels to
No,
whatever it
those
is
people.
that
Natural
that
parks.
person wants to
Yeah,
try to
natural
preserve
parks.
and have it
Natural
developed
park,
as.
But
The
that's
way
only
the Forest Service manages its campgrounds, it's recreation, and the BLM, the recreational facilities.
I think
They
it's
have,
property period.
Private
That they
farms,
go
the
to that
BLM,
property owner, whatever
the
that is,
ability
and
to
go to
manage
the
a certain
city
group
and
of
ask the
campgrounds.
city for the
And
city
then
to take
those
it.
people that you meet in
But
those
the county's
campgrounds
left
are
out of the
private
discussion.
employees of this company. But where you will
Has
hurt the BLM and the
To be what
Forest
you
Service
said.
by cutting of employees, you won't have the government official to monitor the behavior of the contractors that are running their campgrounds. That's where
Yes.
you're gonna run
But
into the problems.
an invitation
But
from the
those
cities,
public land campgrounds,
an agreement.
they use their revenue that they get from the campers to do their improvements. Those contracts are set up in a way where they have to spend so much of their revenues on improvements and maintenance. But
So
the
could
trail,
it go back and how,
roads,
and how does it
are
go back?
all government activities.
Legislatively.
That's where you're gonna, without the employees, you're not gonna have.
Yeah, I don't think the county can, but I don't think the county can.
But that's part of our, part of what you
Policy
guys want, you know, all that kind of stuff.
to cover that type of authority.
Looks like everything we're looking at up here going from
It would be better for
today
it to be
to 20
legislative,
years from now.
and it would be incorporated equally statewide, instead of it being, 45 county.
Infrastructure.
No, you know,
So,
the water quality and the surface water, like Spirit Lake,
So
Swan
if
Lakes, Gate,
land is
Monterey, Kootenai,
annexed by the city,
is a marriage between the state of Idaho, Department of Environmental Quality, the Department
acreage
of Land,
restriction per lot,
and the
does
federal
it still
agencies.
fall under that or it no
And
longer
so if the
falls?
federal agencies
Completely goes away, the city can do whatever they want to do,
Staff.
rezone it, however they want to rezone it.
to keep the
Generally, that's why the property owner would approach the city for
Well,
annexation,
it's
so that they
I
can
hope we can.
have access to the sewer and water
They're
services
gonna
that
degrade.
are required for greater.
And then if the Idaho
That's another
legislature
thing,
won't fund
legislatively.
Department of Environmental
You know, why do we
Quality
have-
or
why do we
Department
have
of Land,
that?
they get mad at it for some reason.
But
Then
Why are we
we're
even here
gonna
talking
lose
about
the water quality in the surface
Why
water.
is Kootenai County getting that?
Because it's
And that's the kind of big
Mandated by the
we
state.
have.
And they have a, what is it, chapter 67,
But it's, I mean, that's been in business since 1982 in environmental.
code 67, chapter 6100. Tells us all about it. And it tells us kind of what the things to consider.
Now, for instance, the
Discuss
cleanup on the
things like
Superfund
this.
site won't stop.
And number one on the list of
If
things
the
to
government
consider.
doesn't fund it, and EPA, only got rid of
That's
EPA,
nice.
it wouldn't stop because people doing their thing were the ones that got sued.
I'm a firm believer in
That
property rights,
represents
and
the
every
money
time
companies, and they're doing
want to create open space,
$600 million
we're telling somebody they can't do something with their land.
plan because it's done
So
so.
that used to be a
mine
thing, I guess,
companies
they
take
can
it
afford
from
to write that
the
down.
polluters have to pay for it.
And even
Now, that wouldn't have happened if there hadn't been any federal
If somebody-
policies, wouldn't have had anybody in the Justice Department
these
to
guys
go
are
after
already
it.
for work, so it's all.
So, I mean,
Well, I'm
there are
surprised.
certain things that, you know, as this
somebody
needs to
writes
understand, you know, and I know I take on it.
And you can have open
Clean up the
space.
Superfund sites funded out of the
Space.
Sporting Trust.
They'd like to make $1 bazillion.
Campgrounds are run by contractors.
You actually get $1 bazillion
So
for
it's
that.
not, so some of the things that the federal government's doing here are going to completely destroy all of
It
it.
doesn't have it, when you do it, you change it.
Going back to right
Change
now,
it.
that
Do it.
came up and it's a really huge piece of duplicate. So what issues are there? We apply the analysis of what's available now, a lot of it is, really, in terms of
managed or owned by the county,
It's very complex.
it's,
No doubt. More,
Well,
I guess, legislative.
I know.
boat launches.
Well, it's a couple.
And that's about it.
Yes.
Don't the boat launches have to be approved by the corporation?
No,
They don't have to be?
no.
What, a couple years
They're
ago,
all-
I think it was Riscatari.
IDWR and Department of Lands, Idaho Department of Lands, and that's it. But
So is that
to your
something
point,
that,
we don't actually have any active recreation. The county doesn't
because
do
then
parks
you
and
buy,
recreation like most places.
pay people,
There's no recreation programming.
Right.
it becomes so public, should that space.
I would think so.
To
Never actually worked anywhere. where you say,
Of
"Oh,
the central government and the state government.
There's something probably ought to be jotted down there, because that's, oops, it's already been thought about apparently. Bruce
So when they were talking about
initiated it.
last before they were talking about an open
Right.
It was,
space on the
I
prairie,
think there was a lot of ambiguity
Parks and Rec.
associated with it, like
was
how
that
For
much
open
land
space.
is
For
actually
open
being
It's not Parks and
used
Rec,
as
Parks
a
and Waterways.
place.
For open, there's no money to do
There
any
was a
recreation.
lot of,
We do it. You're
yes.
right.
And
This county has
that's
no
where a lot of
recreation
people were
program.
just not
We have a Park and
certain
Waterways
about what was
Department.
gonna happen.
And all that
Who was
is
gonna
boat
have
launches
that
into
control,
the
who
lake.
was gonna make
Now,
those
I'll give you,
decisions. You know, there's.
Lake
it's
Correlation on
something
restaurant
that
likes
when it
have
comes
more
forward
voters
again,
than any place
it
else
will
in
be a
the
lot
state.
more clear.
This does bring up.
So they're very highly
We didn't
needed.
notice when you jotted
You need to disabuse yourself
Oh,
of
you
the
sat
idea
down
that
with
we
your
have
recreation.
recreation. No. We have no parks and recreation.
We're talking about ways to
Stuff
incentivize
you see
farming.
are
That's
all
kind of what I'm
cities.
talking about. If you want to
Forest
force these farmers to come on board, that's kind of cool. Kind of rural.
Because the entire shoreline, Portland Lake is
But if the guy can't make money farming,
Yeah.
then he needs to be incentivized
What about
he or she.
What about what?
And that's what.
tribal.
Tribe has,
One of his
they-
trips up there was incentivizing.
See, that's
And
the problem, but
The Coeur d'Alene Tribal Reservation.
That's kind of saying what I want to say, I think.
But within that boundary, the tribe
The other
doesn't
thing you
actually
said was-
own very much of the land at all, it's all privately owned.
To
now,
relax.
some of that is by private business.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is a private party, not
To me,
the
that
private government. Now,
highlights-
they are,
They have something,
they're getting more land, they're getting more land, but it's a fun, see what happened,
Everybody, I
they
make
made
it,
it
trees,
reservation.
regulations cost money.
And then the federal government took the reservation away from them, and they let other people come in and homestead.
Well, that's part of the.
That's why you got all those big farms down there owned by non-Indian people. And then they made it a reservation. And so it was kind of, but their government manages the activities within the boundary, okay?
For the
To a certain
containers
extent.
and things, so they don't have to pay
Except
for
for-
permit and.
Huh?
Except those.
Yeah, if you have their own
It doesn't
service.
the regulations or
Yeah, they have their own
process.
You know, the police.
Still a regulation that says you can't have a container.
Yes, that's
You
true.
know, but the tribal entities say we're independent nations and all that, but they're all owned by the federal government.
Here.
But anyway, so, but that's the situation, so like Coeur d'Alene Lake, there's one that one, the one they have now, the Forest Service campground on Coeur d'Alene Lake.
So that was, the county has no active recreation, it seems like we should. It's not personal opinion, but.
So for clarity on that, there's facilities and there's programs. Program that would be like classes, camps, things like that. Are we saying that the county lacks both programming and facilities?
Well, you talked to this, you know where our facilities are.
Yeah. I'm talking about programming, whether or not
There's
that's.
not any that I know.
So,
Yeah.
so, share that tomorrow.
Well, I can't, because I don't know about it, but I can tell you, for instance, Boulder, where I worked for 12 years, they had full staff, full-time, and full-time programs in the county. So there were active recreation areas you could go in the county, outside of any city attached there. County had its own trail system, its own allotment of parks. You could go visit historic sites that had been converted into parks. All that was county owned. Here we had zero of that.
With the exception of
that one
But
historic.
they
street.
get
Kootenai, yeah.
Right, but that's mostly actually the state.
Yeah, that's the state that they have to try.
Boundary
You
county
know,
might be better.
if that is
I don't know
something
that Bonner.
you're
offers any
facing
recreation program.
here in the county.
Boundary county
there are a
does.
lot of acres.
Offer recreation program.
See, if you don't own anything, you don't need a program to manage it. They don't own anything.
Yeah. That's right, we had 100 and something acres.
Good.
Outside of the airport, you know, good.
Yeah. But those boat launches, some of them, there are some state land that is managed by the county.
Right.
But there are other small land boat launches that are owned by the county.
Right.
So he can bring a lot from the farming aspect.
But other than that, there's like maybe 3 properties that I think are all primarily undeveloped.
Yeah.
That
Those
the
issues,
county
that's
Oh,
his
we
life.
don't have active recreation.
There's no,
Generations.
nothing, there's bathroom, no
No path, no picnic area.
picnic area.
No nothing.
Where are those?
Scavenger.
We haven't matched in the profile.
So there are other, there's a boat ramp, there's
The issues that farmers face.
Rainy Hills,
There's generations
so you
that
get
are
access
walking
to
away,
the river.
coming back, how
Rainy
how all
Hill.
that's running.
There's a big boat ramp, parking area, toilet
We're
building.
working on trying to get them to adjust it. Doesn't help
And
today,
then the
but
one, there's no toilet facilities at
Well,
Rose Lake, but that's a big boat
I think the
ramp on the river.
aquifer is something
And then there's
through policy.
1 or 2 more down the river in chain links, but those are all run by the federal government.
So, as we're looking at goals, do we want to say to change the zoning so that no new come up with some chemical program? I mean, is that, or do we want to say, okay, it's left to the cities and state operate on that land? Do we want that as a goal? You know, those are grandfathered.
I think you should want it, here's why.
No new business, and then.
The director of Parks and Waterways has been asking for at least 13 years, I know, of funding to do a parks master plan, so that he can do the very thing you just
So
suggested.
those are
It's
things
been
that
denied every
can
time
be discussed.
that he's asked for.
So why, is money tight?
Money
But what is the goal? Okay, what is the goal for that?
to do what she just
It's
said,
so
to have
important.
active recreation
It's so
in
important.
unincorporated county,
We
where
can't.
you could go picnic with your grandchildren or children.
See, in the middle of it, if you don't set up a program like that, and have, if an area is set up as a county park, say, 5 years from now, here comes the city, trying to annex. They can't annex that part.
Well, they could, but it'd still be a park.
Yeah, they can't be converted into residential.
Can they force annex? They can't force annex.
They can't stop annexation.
You're not against the counties. They couldn't actually force a county owned land into the city without the county agreeing.
Yeah, if it's county owned land, yeah, right, that's what I'm saying, the park would be county owned and they could afford it. But no, all of this private property on the prairie out here that's being annexed by post walls and craft.
That's the
Yeah,
rationale.
the
for having
person, the
it.
owners, you know, they can't force it.
No, it's an arm's length transaction.
Yeah.
In this state, you can't do forced annexation without the owners. My opinion.
Unless
No way
it's
out of
enclave.
And meaning all the way around.
Yeah.
Because there's several
And
pieces.
even then,
I think that's still 15.
even then, most cities don't like to
What
go
is it?
there.
No, yeah, you'll find that all over, if you look at city limits now, all over Idaho, you'll find these little islands that reduce county.
I would never annex it, because I annex all around there. Nobody wanted to.
But back to your earlier question, that was part of the rationale for the parks and open areas. Is that once they're designated as county park lands, then the county would literally own them, be simple, or have long-term leases for conservation easements. So even if the city attached, it still stays open.
Yeah. See, that would be a way to protect open areas, so you just have the county have an active project.
Well, yeah, and I love that idea, but and I don't, yeah, I like that idea that something can keep farming or something, in an open area, but not that in the city.
Well, actually, you're right, I think we should have.
It means more requirements, more taxes.
Bought it with federal money, taxpayer money.
Well, yeah, I mean, it just, I, or,
So, you know, for a lifestyle.
I see all these developers, and all they
I don't know if this
all
would
they
be helpful,
see
but in the
is
private sector, my
dollars.
husband's business,
And I live right out of the mountain.
he's in the financial industry.
Sick and tired of
When
it.
you have a
And
broker
they don't care
who
about
works
what
underneath
happens to
the
other
umbrella
people.
of one
All they
firm,
do is see dollar signs and they don't care at all
and
about.
then stays within it but becomes more
You know,
independent.
lifestyle, and then
The
you got cows and
individual
pigs and
office
whatever,
where that broker
and you're
works,
ruining my lifestyle. because-
loses that revenue, right?
I don't
Because he's
care
not
if you
staying
like
within
it.
the umbrella of the company, but he's moving, he's getting a different
Well, at
designation.
least I know state
And
law.
so the manager is losing
Yeah.
that revenue
Well,
that
the-
was generated
the one
by
piece
him,
when,
but
you know,
because he's not.
About 4 years ago,
there's
when
no way
they
to compete
chopped
for
up the
that
two
revenue.
front pieces in
And
front
so
of you from
what
10 to
the
5.
firms do is they pay
And
that
since then,
manager
the
a
one front piece
percentage
right on the
of
corner
the
was
revenue
sold
over the
to
course of
the
time to
people that own all
offset
the
that basically it's initial loss. And over the course of years, of course, you're gonna be, you're gonna be a loss. But for the city, the same kind of thing, if they're, I would love to see something to where if
We've
they're
got
gonna
our
take the land, you should compensate the county somehow. So how does that work? Because the county in some ways is still having to provide services.
I don't care what
Right
happens. I'll
now,
spend the
they're
last
actually
time
having less
just to make it
revenue coming in because now the city is taking that over.
So can we agree there ought to be a goal for,
Legislatively, what are services that the county still has to provide. So I think that's a little bit back to your original thing of the growth and why there's a lot of just
for active recreation,
inside the
or active ed,
because of
but recreation? I think we need to pursue these interveners.
What you're saying, man, what you're not.
Yeah, to
If the
get us
citizens
to work together on how they annex or should annex or how we deal with law. I mean,
is the county's
in
revenue.
Virginia, you know, I lived in rural
Well,
Virginia
that's
the
what
first time I was back
that's
in
what I'm
Texas.
trying to figure that out, is
There
that
kinds
something
of
that?
George Washington, Thomas Jefferson,
Yeah, but that's what I'm wondering.
and then you come to a new subdivision, 4-lane paved highway in front of the subdivision, and then back under the go trail again on the other, because they were making development space for all
Have
the
a city area that's all.
and it was a
budgeted
ridiculous
and all
crazy
this
thing, well, they should, but.
So backing down to that,
We
the
did
overall
have
goal
this,
would be
just
something like
my house to
preserving
my
that
neighbor's
over
house
character
to,
and value.
two-lane
The
street
next
to this,
executive
corner
would be
property
something
is
like,
gonna put basically
work
a
with the
commercial
cities and counties.
slash private
See what those
business school.
is.
Well, yeah, I
Right
don't know what
there.
their
Yeah,
goals
My
were, I
whole
mean,
to
they
have,
were.
to have some kind, it was gonna completely change the area, it would actually lower our property values.
A
And there
development
was
set
nothing
down.
like that in the area, and lights, pollution, all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff. So how do you?
Well, if you build a
how do you
subdivision
make
that
those
has
things?
5,000
They wanted to do, would have absolutely negatively
and you
affected.
have everything within the
Yes.
subdivision built.
So how can I
And dump all the traffic out on
And,
a
you know, when you do
2-lane,
all these different
24-foot
things,
wide county
then
road.
if the city comes in and takes.
Like
that,
they
can
do on
do
a prairie
what
out
they
in
want to do.
Yeah.
And we're
So
basically
what I'm
having to
hearing,
provide
we
our
started with
property
the
line
recreation
on the
growth,
west,
right?
that's like 40
Unchecked
acres.
growth,
And we
unchecked
said, hey,
development.
we would love to buy
Rapid
the
annexation,
guys in front of us, because we're on
which I
10,
heard,
and the guy in front of
and
us is
then the
5,
prairie
and then he's
specifically.
got 40.
Correct. There's
We'd
a
like to buy a
nexus.
buffer.
Well,
Knowing
as far as
that
growth,
someone's
I think
probably gonna sell his
infrastructure,
land and develop it,
No,
well, I
no,
would, we would love to.
interagency
you know,
agreement
buy
between the county and the
2 or
city.
3 acres, 5 acres, the neighbors.
That
want to. So
will
we just
help
kind
you
of
deal with the
extend
growth.
Well,
that property line a little bit more, so we don't have to there. Didn't go well, he was not
Water
very able to the conversation at all.
And you stick it down.
And he's basically said that when he passes, he doesn't care what happens, his daughter can do whatever she wants to do, and she's ready to talk about going to
It's not
the city and
certified.
having it annexed and having, you know, 100 homes. Now, that's up to the city, they're totally fine, and they can sell it, totally fine. But, okay, so now you're putting 100 homes on these certain tiny lots because of the acreage next to 10 acres, 5, now you're making these islands, these county islands and things, and I think that
And
would
it's
severely
great, you know.
lower our property value.
And we
So how do you
have
deal with all
the
the zoning
basin
issues
commission,
like
which is
that,
supposed to
and still keeping the
seven
county
governments
with private
working
property
together to
rights?
clean up the mess that got passed with the Columbia
You know,
River.
looking at the larger picture and
But you
possibly
don't
looking
have
at
any
the county
joint
loss or anything. I
effort
don't know, that's what I'm
to
afraid.
maintain the water quality in some of the other ways. And I think you need, I want to have joint.
It's hard to each
I
other.
don't want the
Correct,
federal
and it's
government
hard,
coming
because
in.
I
Like
agree.
I said before, I said, you guys either behave yourself on Portland Lake, with the EPA up there, making a super site, the whole food site, and they'll run it.
And
So
positively
you
or
don't want that.
negatively.
So what we
affect
need to do is
my
have
neighbors,
these
vice
joint,
versa, then when it aids you,
in 20 years, I'd like to see a joint management
existing.
effort on the part of
How do you
all
navigate that?
governments on
Well, yeah, it's a tough one, I agree. Sometimes it's traffic a little bit, but it's your property.
all of that.
You might be able to get that.
I'm situation where it's been a long time kind of work
You're not gonna get it
the property is
I
gone
think
up.
we're at
in,
a.
going all the way into Washington, any help from Washington.
Well,
Because it's like,
We put that on the-
Yeah, I don't know, sorry, Bill. Kind of went off onto the squirrely tangent.
they're not part of the-
I did. Either basically.
He's happy.
I'm grooving on this.
I thought you were, and I were about the same generation. Should have known what grooving was.
So I could all about and then the state of Idaho had the one commission. From the standpoint of the local standpoint. The tribe and the state of Washington joined the commission with memorandum of agreement. So the 7 governments I work for, Shoshone, Benoit, the U.S. government,
Like this.
so that commission sits,
But then it rises and goes up.
and they're jointly managing that entire region of the range.
There's share that.
The managing goes for mine was.
So the city has.
No, they manage it for water quality. And clean up of the.
Does that have anything to do with the all from the province commission? Is that?
So, I mean,
Just us, and we're talking about some of that.
yeah, but what I'm saying is that you need the same kind of things for nutrient quality. Now, they are involved in nutrient quality quite a bit because in Coeur d'Alene Lake,
Yes.
if we don't control the nutrient, the Coeur d'Alene lakes, the heavy metals, pollution, contamination, the bottom so they are managing nutrients. And that's what Coeur d'Alene's doing with the stormwater runoff. And that's what communities in the Silver Valley, tertiary sewer treatment.
I know what you're saying, but you've got.
They got a $54 million
Houses,
water
yards,
treatment
between the
plant.
houses,
Kellogg,
obviously.
it's big groundwater,
More to maintain.
the water coming out of the mines.
There's something between
Capturing
that
the
and
water
something
comes
got
from the trees
was
and the water that's going into the
about
south.
this the other day, I read
94%
it, that
reduction in nutrients and chemicals.
he was
So they're,
saying that.
they're trying to protect Coeur d'Alene Lake from going, you know,
Farmland
like for hand. So I mean, but it's a joint
20
set of
cents to
government.
every dollar.
And you can get Washington
But
State
single-family
to work with you,
homes,
but it, you know, like you say, I used to work with Inslee's office.
every dollar.
You know, so, but what I'm saying, we need to do that with these bodies of water.
Yes, and those are the statistics that Bruce.
Because without the water quality in those
So we
lakes,
should have last year, the prairie full of
those
homes,
places
and
are
it's
no better
better
than
where it's easier.
the Great Lakes.
Right.
No.
That's what he said.
Yeah, I mean, it
You
is.
can pack the homes in
Some of those
little
smaller.
8,200 square foot lots, to lower our cost
So
of
how do we
services.
get down to the
And they're being facetious, but that is what it
individual
is.
level? Just to stop it, but who wants it now? We're talking grand scale. We don't have some rules that say, no, you can't divide this land up into 1 acre parcels because we can't handle the sewage, we can't handle runoff, we can't handle whatever.
He and I, years ago, worked on setbacks and development around Kootenai and in Kootenai County. And of course,
And all of the streets
the best we could do was 25 feet. But that's your point. Yeah, see?
But now, all of
We're
the
separated.
Eric, did you get the water charges
Yeah.
on sewers?
Yeah.
Goals set to the.
Yeah, so I'm taking notes here, I'm hearing, what I hear is, potential policy directives, potential goal directives, and potential action items. An action item could be development of certain size
Maintenance costs.
shall have
Right.
Yes.
as an example.
Yeah.
Adoption of joint agreements between jurisdictions to maybe size
Exactly his
to
point.
meet a policy for reducing nutrient loads with the goal of preserving
Good.
right?
Yes.
And then, as Bill mentioned, some of
It
these
deteriorates
policies,
over
goals and
time.
actions, they relate together, right?
Right. More than one.
Yeah, growth and recreation,
Money is
an
there.
interesting nexus there.
So that's
So,
why.
going right to an action,
Towns will deteriorate.
pros
Who
of
of us-
parks, recreation,
yeah.
open space.
Yeah.
Or
fun.
they just raise taxes a lot.
That's kind of what I was thinking since 2010, by the way. But is it an action item? Or is it an action item with a specific time frame associated to it? Within, the first 3 years or documents, we shall do this. Having very specific timelines for actions based on the policies, based on the goals, based on the visions is kind of what we're trying to go to. Today, we're not going to figure out 20 years. We're just going to identify some things to tackle now. Maybe through an interim amendment. It's not, really doesn't change the nature of the plan. Because to change the nature of the plan, we really want a much broader process of support to do those actions.
Growth or in this case for maintenance, kind of the same thing. Post Falls has, I don't know this for a fact.
Obviously, it's phased in front of the county commissioners.
Paving or otherwise
We
improving
have enough back.
different parts of the
The
city
people who care
on
about
a
county
rotating
planning,
basis,
county
so
parks,
it never happens
county
at them
taxes,
all at the same
county
time.
recreation.
They maintain different.
Yeah, go on,
That's
work, I
from
don't
the
know.
people.
I don't know if we hit the
I think the highway
typical.
districts
Well,
don't do the same thing.
my thing
They
is-
go through and do a certain percentage
With
and
our
it's in their district,
commission,
so it's not all for nothing, yeah.
I don't know that we're there.
So,
because we're thinking,
With your theory
I
of
think they're looking at dollars. Really.
planning for growth.
And what's it gonna cost to
Planning growth.
develop this?
What are your ideas for policies to do that?
Because what, not only
That's a good question, isn't it?
to develop.
And most of those fall out of,
What
fall out
about
of our years, or our
personnel?
purview, again.
How many personnel?
But I think some of it,
And this and
Have
that.
that, what did those call it, the capital investment fund or something that would allow
I can see
for,
that, especially.
My experience working with, and I work with Leslie, and I work with
infrastructure, whether it's the sewer, or whether it's the water system, or whether,
I think we've got pretty much agreement on
we
our.
have to look at that a little bit, I think maybe the county.
And
It's gonna take some.
I think because both.
What does that mean to the two then?
Pardon?
What does that mean, reacting and paying more? What ends on it?
Well, that's the other question. It'd be like a religion. I am a whatever. I go
It's
to
pretty
the
simple now.
Brown church worship the dollar and he runs it on Saturday there or something. That's something great. It's just a belief.
How does it come out?
It's a commitment to
address
you
that?
know, like,
Yeah.
total sewage and all.
That's-
I don't know if that.
That's when you have to go back to Bill's
There
diagram,
was,
that's when you get into the, okay, how do we
we
get
go
there?
back, but
Yeah.
the life plan encourages
Is
you
it
know, just
an
stable.
acre minimum?
And then all of a sudden, you have this
Plus
whole
5
thing,
acre
and so that's
minimum.
what we're needing
Maybe
to.
there's
And she's got a name for the, that's right.
Well, I mean,
You know, that would
These
be,
people came up with a
these
proposal.
Lines,
You know,
we were
probably
gonna go
that's
from
one end of the
X
spectrum.
amount of population, to Y amount of
Or is
population,
it, yes.
very cheap time.
Grant funding.
And then all the
Sewer
services
the raft
that are required
No
to
wonder
service
it-
all these people.
you know what I'm saying.
I
Set
don't-
this
I don't
number,
think-
and now we're at this number, and we don't have the. We
That's-
don't have
And like you
how do you work?
you have a very good point.
people
I'm
can say, I
not
believe in something,
versed
but what is their
in
commitment to the
county
truth?
dynamics.
She is all about personal.
What had been going
personal-
on historically
Personal
versus,
rights.
yeah.
I know she's.
So, I mean, it's,
And it happened so quickly. That
but
was-
not because we got something in this policy thing about hazardous materials.
Yeah.
This company looking at right now to consumer recycling. So we're making some.
There's a subway, it's gonna
That's
count.
not
A subway.
Well, there's cycles, natural cycles. Like, I used to live in Colorado
the
Springs.
policy has to.
It's just very, you
Now,
have
we
food
haven't
and
brought
then
it
you
to
have.
Yeah, so
We haven't even-
they may tell you to take all that stuff out of it. That's-
And that area, now Denver's different.
Right.
Denver has
Oh, the
encouraged
existing
these
solar
counties,
No, the one
you know,
that you
talking
drafted,
about-
I gave you some stuff.
There are now.
Oh, right.
Denver, all the different suburbs, and it's now
Yeah.
moving
Yeah.
back towards
Well,
Colorado.
yeah, it starts with,
Overtaking
okay,
Paso
it's
Rock,
fully
that's when I lived
understandable.
there, you know, huge swaths of open land between Colorado
That's where
Springs
we
and
are.
Monument. Monument to Castle Rock, Castle Rock to Denver, there was, you knew why they were going, now, not the case, which is something that they're having, so what is our natural cycle?
Yeah, and I went through that natural cycle back in 2008, we sat in meetings just like this. Wanted to, how we're going to affordable housing. Because of cycles, I was kind of of the opinion that affordable housing would go back around, right? Looking back around in 2008, the housing market crashed.
Yeah.
And what
Readjusted.
What
But
consequences of those
to
fruits?
digress just a little bit, it's a personal question, when did you move there?
2016.
No, that's not freedom. You don't have freedom to
How long have you been there?
sewage. 2009.
Abuse and freedoms.
Yeah.
What I've seen, and
We did it easy.
Well, you can read it like a book, right?
they're coming here to get.
That's why I'm asking questions and not making statements, because, you know, I know that I am not aware of a lot of the dynamics.
May I digress just a little bit further? We had a public hearing right here.
But they're bringing,
I don't even know what it's about now, but a fellow came up to the podium and said, I'm
and most of them you can't.
Mr. So-and-so from Temecula. I've been up here for
The
Temecula
process,
last
they're
year.
bringing that same.
We've got to stop.
Brings the different.
Can't let this turn, we cannot let this turn into Temecula.
Anything, and like the ones that are going to the fire, I think. the next
Aren't you
year-
part of the
Yeah,
problem?
We're
and-
actually-
And that's the thing, you know, now that I'm here, please go to
Because of
the
the
fires.
fires.
No.
And you
I
can't
want an
play.
old house. I want an old house. That's my thing.
You know,
You know, they
What do you
can't,
think about?
they can't
they're
even
big,
do fire insurance.
you know, this is the way we did it in California.
Wait, there's a difference between what?
And that's fine, I understand you want to get away from that stuff, but this is how we do it. You know, if you come in here for a new life, you bring it for a visa, adjust.
Can I use that?
Absolutely. Live here for a while before you start changing all your vehicles to, and this and that. Yeah, so people, that's my.
But the growth.
I get heard that a lot. And it's always throws me for a loop. It's like, there's a lot of cultural conflict going on.
Right.
You know, I'm a planner. We deal with, you know, primarily development. Ultimately, like, what's the zoning you say? How do you tackle that through zoning?
In the '70s, in the '70s, when it was in Thompson, it was another 1%. We had a big influence in people coming home. Super nice guys, but the same thing. They brought all their food, and this went on. George, he was in.
Yeah.
So they sold him. How do you get super nice? And we're both the same thing. He wasn't that one person talking to my dad.
What's that?
The same thing, thank you, so, I mean, that is how we get
Can you give me an example? I'm really curious.
Well, I don't use it. It was all political stuff.
Yeah, so it goes back to the
I was just a
question
kid back
of, we're obviously not going to stop it, but is there a way to gently slow it down? Yeah.
That was the big thing. And it was just like,
Well, I'm getting to a point up in here, this community was
Yeah, we live in a market economy.
Democrat.
Can I
minor. You had 5,000 or 6,000 people living in the Silver Valley that were mining.
Well, one good thing about COVID was the job
My
market,
family, they
you know,
were Democrats
changed
because
where
they
people
were
can
ex-farmers from
work
North
from
Dakota.
home. And so it did provide an opportunity to actually say, okay,
50s,
where
40s.
would I really
Yeah.
actually like to live? And now that I can work remotely.
Bonner County was Democrats
So you're now
elected the governor, the
ensuring
Democratic
you don't
governor
happen to
of Bonner
be
County.
physical.
So it was different, but you had, there were 7 sawmills.
It's, it's a lot more, more
And we were selling about 500 million board feet of timber off of national forest lands in Panhandle, Idaho. 500 million, the forest service was so much they can white. So, and then when all
my
of these
son's
things changed,
getting his degree
it
in
put all those people out of work.
and he was looking
Made them
online,
mad
he's
at the
doing it
government and
online,
all
so that
that, so
also
then you
changed,
had
so
this
school,
big change.
you can be wherever you want to be, so
And
he's
the whole
here,
community.
but he's here.
So
And he's looking at these
it's
jobs
changed.
that are
It's
all around the
completely
East Coast,
changed.
which he was not, they're 100 and 200 grand, and they're hurting. So he, online,
Despite
he might
talking
have to
about
go out there 3 times a year, but he can stay here. He's making the money here, but he's actually spending it here, so that's a good thing too. But so that dynamic is
the impact,
changed. His mom happy.
putting aside that feel about stuff. We're not, our whole social structure
Just changed.
Employment, right now.
We don't have wealth creating industry.
Well,
Yeah.
construction is always hard.
And that building is
Like construction, taking care of old people.
That is many.
You got construction, taking care of old people.
Two
When I was a
days.
kid around here, you know where I went to my dentist?
You got
I
an
just
extra.
drive to Spokane.
Is he taking care of old
Sure.
I mean, there weren't any dentists in Kootenai.
I want to hear that one.
Did you sell your family
Okay.
business? Is that your family business?
We ready to re-corral before lunch and kind
We sold it.
of compare notes?
Yeah.
How you guys doing over there?
excellent.
Yeah?
We've got a lot of ink here.
He's
I
vibing.
do too.
No, you're
I was
grooving.
grooving.
You were grooving. Yes.
Okay.
Still grooving.
Yeah, I'll give this the hand up there.
Yeah, I like the way the conversation kind of segued from one.
Okay.
Said diverging, but it actually worked out.
It was actually, you could call it a segue? Sometimes it seems pretty abrupt.
Did you escape?
That old Cocoa Puffs was wearing out this morning. Well, they put a thing down on the brakes and it turned on that wire.
So meeting of group 1 and group 2. Okay, so we'll start off with what I found. Please correct me if I don't
Yeah,
get this right. So, we talked about water quality. I got a lot of stuff in here. You know, we talked about issues and we talked about, you know, going back to our, you know, issues, goals, objectives, and then actions. We identified some actions. But we talked about, you know, failing septic tanks, of course, wells at risk of contamination for, you know, what the depletion of the aquifer and also contamination of the aquifer. The challenges of sewer treatment, risks of federal state funding, which was a theme for a couple of infrastructure challenges throughout transportation, firefighting, another topic of concern. So there's a lot more beyond this, but I'm gonna start with kind of broader topics. So water quality, transportation, fire, civility, recreation, recreation meaning there's really no recreational facilities or recreation programming offered in the county. There's primarily boat launches.
The only thing there with recreation, I think like we said, that you probably won't have a program if you don't have any facilities. So they're kind of
right.
Yeah, they kind of walk together.
Right. You know, it's in civility, neighborliness, abuse of freedoms, cultural clash. We've seen through growth. Through in-migration. I'm just going to write, growth. Not prepared for the in-migration. The unchecked growth, rampant annexation, we heard, and the prairie under threat. Some of this, a lot of these things are related.
I don't know whether it's a topic, interagency agreements between the county and the cities, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a, not.
That would be an action item, I think.
But I think it's a goal too, though. It's kind of two, you see what I'm saying?
Well, an interagency agreement might be a way to get there.
Right.
To meet the goal.
However you talking about it.
A policy, actually, of interagency agreements. And an action might be a specific agreement with a specific agency.
Right.
And then recreation, a pros plan would be an action item, right? And that might have a whole series of action items tied to it. Then economic development. No wealth creating industries we heard. Let me just kind of go back here, just to kind of talk about a little bit of nuance. So the nuance between growth and recreation. No real long-term vision for parks and recreation, no offering of facilities or programming. And that also kind of got lumped into growth projections, with the annexation, unchecked development, are there opportunities to tamper that down through acquisition of parks properties, to preserve some of that rural character and open spaces and offer some programming or facilities and help ensure that growth isn't completely unchecked, as the Rathman Prairie Aquifer was kind of the big example there. $2.3 billion needed for transportation in 2045. No federal funding.
That's over the next 20 years.
Over the next 20, yeah. Just to satisfy what the growth projections are.
That keeps things the way they are.
Just to keep the level of service that we have today.
There you go.
Gotcha.
How much? 3 billion.
Also related to that, related to just service delivery generally, is that residential doesn't pay its way. So if everything develops just residential, it's only going to exacerbate the shortfalls because the level of service is going to suffer, or the costs are going to increase to maintain existing service. The uncertainty of federal funds being at risk, and even if not, the match is not there for that infrastructure investment for transportation. And the same is true, maybe even more so, for sewer treatment facility. Of protection of the lake and protection of the aquifer is a primary goal. that's kind of the broad view of Group 1's findings. You have questions, Bill? You want to, or anybody want to compare notes?
Sure. How about if I put a little column there?
Yeah.
John.
I made one for you. And we got your Sharpie.
Thank you. All right, so a lot of similarity here. We had friendliness. And people who've been here for only a decade have noticed a change in attitudes in this community. People, particularly during the COVID influx, and senses that we have more people competing for the same inventory of services and resources. So it's finding elbow room and jostling for a scarce commodity is making people a little bit more irritated. Okay, so economic opportunity and diversity. And so some of the conversation there, employment and workforce development for youth. We're talking about availability and access of the trades, and let's see what we can do to get our youth programmed into a noble way of working, and that we're accommodating the next generation and hoping that they live here too, if we can. And so whether that's in a more diverse economic spectrum that may put mining and manufacturing back on the table, or whether it's something that's even online, where people are earning incomes from someplace else and supporting their households and businesses here. Open space access. Talking about annexation and this kind of leapfrogging, urbanization and the loss of opportunity, routine open space. Looking for better, more effective coordination between the cities and the county, and that there is an opportunity for a conflict of people who are looking to support property rights and their freedom to annex the cities and develop versus the public good of keeping the open space, and if there's a compensatory balance here to offset the preservation move. And the creation, once again, opening up the conversation of a public funding resource to pay for that open space retention. Okay, farmland. Preservation. These are hopes, right? Hopes for 2045. That the rural character remains prominent in Kootenai County, and that we really do find ways to incentivize farmland and allow public resources to fund that farmland preservation as a public good. Things like farm trust and other stuff. And then also they talked about relaxing regulations in ag land, so people who have farmland can keep it viable, maybe experiment with different uses in their property, and that we do encourage a new generation of farmers in the community. Water quality came up. Aquifer protection, restricting potential polluters from contaminating the aquifer. And then again, the concept of maybe reducing development intensity in our open spaces and finding a way to compensate people for that reduction in development opportunity. We didn't really talk about conservation and increasing draw on the aquifer, but I think our conversation may have gone that way if we didn't segue to fiscal balance. Okay, finding ways to smooth the annexation transition from county to city and distribute the property tax proceeds, perhaps anticipating the dynamics and the changes to county services provision. so the city isn't the only beneficiary of an annexation. Even anticipating that long-term urbanized development may benefit the county, but there's a period of discomfort there during the development phase. That still, even though land may be within the city, people are still reliant on the county for fundamental services, and those need to be recognized. That it's probably good to continue to demonstrate how much it costs to provide services for different types of development, similar to what came out of the earlier conversation, and that we should plan now for long-term cost applications. There are plenty of opportunities where we can learn from people who've been surprised by having to rebuild something. And then we also talked about development compatibility. Let's see, scale and impacts to surroundings. While people are respecting property rights, they still want to make sure that they're treated fairly by someone else's development next door. And maybe considering methods to make things fit a little bit better. And getting into the thoughts of if people are exercising their property rights to the fullest and creating a negative impact, how do we compensate people whose property values may have been diminished by the creation of a pig farm as a permitted use next door? Pig farm was my example, not the groups. And then also just recognizing that change is really part of what we have to plan for. And that got us to the next topic, which is planning for growth. And there is a distinction drawn between planning for growth and planning growth. One's perhaps a little bit more responsive, one a little bit more proactive. But understanding that whatever growth we permit will also come with it a long-term obligation for maintaining infrastructure. And then the concept of readiness versus resilience, where we can anticipate some types of change, but we'll be surprised by others. So how do we ready ourselves where we can and also set ourselves up to be resilient and adaptive to things that surprise us down the road? And then also talking as part of that about housing affordability. Okay, so that's where we wound up with group 2. So it seems like we have plenty of stuff to talk about here as we get ready for our after lunch conversation. Thank you. Aaron?
Excellent. A lot of running things, and lunch should be here within about 10 minutes.
I think it is.
Oh, it is here. Oh, I think let's do it. Let's break for lunch, and if you don't mind, Bill and I might kind of call off.
Get started. Ben, do you want to talk about the April date?
Yeah, so we talked about scheduling hearing for the personal storage building and cargo container. We were looking, potentially, we had been doing some polling, but looking for your guys' availability on April 17th. 17th. That day we'd be actually looking at like maybe 1 o'clock or 1:30. Since this doesn't appear to be controversial in any way, but actually allows for some more flexibility, I think, in the code. And so we at least talked about the idea of maybe having it as an afternoon as opposed to an evening hearing. But if that doesn't work for people, we could possibly do the April 24th, the following week at 6 p.m. So, kind of.
17th afternoon works for me.
Yeah, afternoon.
I like afternoon better.
Yeah, it's good, we do too.
John? Okay, John, does that work for you?
That works.
People want to be controversial, they can get off work and come.
I don't see this one as that much of an interest. Most people
It seems to be
should
making it easier.
be easy, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that's the 17th.
17th.
April 17th. At 1 o'clock.
So you'll send out an email.
Yeah, yeah, send us all an email. Okay.
Got it?
Thank you.
Okey-dokey. Everybody here?
This is Tamara.
Well, actually, no, this is one.
Okay.
Is she coming back?
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
sure.
She's moving
Some
a spot.
things are
She
there.
found a spot, so she's moving.
A parking spot.
That's a highly valuable equipment.
Yeah.
It was there when she saw it, it might be gone by the time she gets done.
Right. She needed to get one of us to stand in it and hold it for her.
I parked down by the old pizza part of it.
That's where I used to go.
Who's the name of that? I can't remember. John, do you remember?
What?
The pizza place down here back in the day?
What county offices are in that building?
Oh,
Like all the way down on Sherman, right?
No, right here.
Oh, no.
One of the guys I went to grade school with in school with, he grew up across the street. Worked there when he moved over here to go to school.
Well, you might recognize it, but I won't come up with it.
It's the weird shaped one right
Across
around
the
the corner.
parking lot, where we are, the next area.
Were you
No,
successful?
right here.
Right up front.
There.
So I will drive you to your car.
Thank you. I was about to ask.
Yes.
And in,
The meeting for April is the 17th of April.
Perfect.
it's just
The,
antiquated buildings, everything.
What time of day?
1 p.m.
So that's a little
Just
early.
having the ground floor parking, we're actually doing submerged area for parking in
Since
the
there's
ground
probably
floor.
not a whole lot of
Parking this off the top is what we thought to do.
Okay, that works.
We
Perfect.
spent 26 million on that new building across the other way. So we don't exactly have any more money for this sort of thing.
Ready, set? Okay. Okay, just kind of come back to what we hope to deliver later following this is two things. Things that we think you ought to maybe tackle sooner rather than later, right? Some surgical tweaks to the goals, policies, maybe even that could lead to some specific actions like some ordinance updates potentially. And of course, that is a public process. Anything you do is a public process. However, there are, but those wouldn't change the nature of what the plan currently says, right? To really change the nature of some of the elements of the plan, like the direction of the plan, should be through a much more robust public process. So we're also going to have a sort of second deliverable that's going to flag those things. What we'd like to do now, we have some ideas based on what we've heard of topics of concern that we did. So what we'd like to do now is kind of hear from you what you've been challenged with when you live through your day-to-day. whether it's you guys hear conditional use permits, is that right? Okay.
No, they don't hear any of that.
Oh, that's all
Here's the
Carl,
same.
gotcha. Okay, ordinance update, where do you struggle with interpreting the plan? You know, for things like any ordinance amendments that comes back to you, or areas that you struggle with, or maybe conflicts.
So we may have to reframe that, Eric, because they don't do any public hearings or
Okay.
anything except code.
Code amendments.
Right.
Okay. Well, where do you think the plan is lacking or has conflict, where that lacks direction, or where it's not properly addressing the topics identified? That's really the task. Now, based on what we've heard, we've flagged some things that we think, but I'd like to open it up first to hear if there's any burning things that you've been thinking about as you've been administering the plan through ordinance updates and recommendations to the Florida County Commissioners. If there's nothing that jumps out right away, that's okay. We have some stuff we have some examples. Let's take one that I'm just familiar with, and that was the Coeur d'Alene tribal rezone. I know there was a little bit of struggle with some of the policy language in the plan to support or not support that request. But is there any elements that you can think of, any policies that we talked about that you struggled with in that interpretation? And that would just be for the commissioners who were actually on the board at that time, which isn't everybody. That's just one example that maybe came to my mind.
You know, Bill and Aaron, we might also just run this through the planning staff, because they're the ones dealing with it on a daily basis.
Sure.
And then bring it back to the planning commission. That way the planning commission has something to chew on, based on our real world staff experience, being in the trenches with it all the time.
Okay, well, we can move into some of our findings.
Yeah.
And maybe, you, go ahead. No, I was gonna go off in another direction, so.
Just overall, in all of our language that we're planning on putting in these documents and stuff, I'd like to be sure that we recognize the independent authorities of homeowners associations and other types of associations that set some of their own standards that might be more restrictive than we come up with for the county. And I think we can deal with that with language, because I know I reviewed some of the stuff, and my homeowners association's got some pretty strict requirements. I mean, you can't even have a disabled car in your yard for more than 30 days. And you can't have any kind of business on your property, commercial operation of any kind. And, some of them say, well, maybe we need to control homeowners associations for writing bylaws like that, but those bylaws, some of those already been in effect for 30 or 40 years, and then what that does is just recognizing the authority that they would have to set some of those. Then that allows the management team for that homeowners association to exercise, their authorities the way they see fit. That's the lowest level of government you have, So just be sure we do that. That's all.
Okay.
What is that? What do those have to do with what we're doing? Those are private, are they not? So why would they affect us, what we're doing?
I think the reverse is kind of true. We send out referrals to HOAs when we're doing special notices or CUPs or even minor subdivisions. And we expect to hear from people if the CBs conflict, the HOA stuff, I mean. And then we deal with that once we hear.
I'm talking about in any of a comp plan or any new codes that we might develop, just to recognize the authorities of those associations to, and whatever we do, it's just a generalized thing, I think that, I did see some conflicts on something, I can't remember what it was I reviewed here.
So as a heads up.
Huh?
So it's a heads up. You're giving
Yeah, and then just a heads up, just to make sure that we recognize those Because until I started looking at some of the stuff we were producing in here, comparing it to the HOA bylaws, I thought, oh my God, these bylaws are really restrictive for my homeowners association.
Well, David, does that take precedence in law? If you sign on to a HOA
When you buy
bylaws?
into one, you were stuck.
Yeah.
That's why you're supposed to read the title, closing papers, and buy
That's-
your home.
And it takes precedence over county
And
regulations.
in actual fact, we cannot enforce those regulations, and we tell people that all the time. What we do.
But here's the problem,
You do
guys.
recognize that.
As the president of a homeowners association, when I want to implement the bylaw of the homeowners association, we got some pretty smart people living out there now. They say, well, the county allows this, why don't you? Even though they signed on and bought the property and they knew the bylaws and all that.
You have to change your bylaws.
Yeah,
That's
it
what
just
you want
makes
to
it
know.
easier for the people administering homeowners associations to be sure that the stuff that we put in our stuff recognizes their authority to do so. That's all. Then when that argument comes up, you just say, hey, it says right here that we can set our own standards. So,
Anything, I mean, we should actually put that into the land use development code now. It'd just be a heads up notice. to
right,
people that
that's all it is, yeah.
They find your bylaws more restrictive.
Exactly. That's all you need to put in there. So I think
But aren't most bylaws in HOAs, when they build a subdivision, most of those have term limits on them that I've seen.
They often do.
They expire after 10 or 20 years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know where I live, they expired after a certain
What
date
we
after
find
the subdivision was
Often
built.
is that is that the HOA is just sort of giving up the ghost
Yeah.
before the bylaws expire, and they're unenforceable.
Exactly.
Mine doesn't.
The relationship I'm most common with for HOAs as it applies to development review is to make sure that common areas are maintained, access is maintained to private roads or private common areas or private stormwater systems or sewer, or septic systems, community drain fields or something like that.
I think it's kind of a tangential request, but, one of the things that came up when we were discussing in our group is that some of those things are not under our purview. But perhaps there's a way to impact them through what is under our purview. So I don't know if those kind of things can be suggested or recommended. For instance, is trade schools. If we would as a county, to somehow support more trade schools in our area, is there anything under our purview that could impact that?
There are.
Well, permitting, I suppose, construction or something.
No, I think
Well, one thing that we found.
Just if they
Yeah.
exist.
Sure, right. And, a lot of that has to do with interagency agreements or funding, allocations by the Board of County Commissioners. And, and that's where specific action items with a timeline and key players identified really comes into play. And one of the findings we've had is your implementation section is pretty weak. Would you agree, Gabe?
yes, absolutely.
The implementation chapter is really just another set of goals and policies. These are some of the ways of
In
implementing
good
this.
direction.
But there's no specific, we're gonna implement this at
At
this
the
time
same time.
and the key players are this. Maybe it's the planning commission, maybe it's the Board of County Commissioners, maybe it's the EDC, maybe there's a partnership between the two. So a specific table of implementation actions at a certain time frame. For example, we talked about a Parks and Recreation plan, that's been talked about for a long time. It's mentioned, county should do the Parks and Recreation master plan, But there's no timeline for it. There's no,
Assignment.
there's no assignments. Thank you.
And
Yes.
there's no why.
Hmm?
There's no why, no explanation as to why.
Ah, even as important, right,
Mhm.
yeah. Why are we doing this?
Right.
But there's no authority either, is there? I mean, there is a parks department in the county now, right?
There's a parks and waterways.
Okay.
They do not do park recreation.
Okay, so does that change any of what we're talking about? I mean, because we don't have authority over parks and recreation.
Well, remember that the comprehensive plan is policy for the entire county.
Right.
And if the commissioners adopt it, that gives them and the county at large the impetus to encourage these things to happen. So yes,
So
it
we-
sets policy for the county.
Yeah, so we can encourage these things to happen. So the parks and waterways, if there's a flow chart, I'm assuming that our commission and theirs are lateral. They don't answer to us.
Right, yes, that's correct. And they're direct report to the commissioners, just like my department is.
Okay. So implementation is almost absent, I would say. There's a section on it, but it's not really an assignment. There are no assignments really given. The other thing we noticed, just to stay with what's absent theme, is fiscal balance really is fairly absent from the comp plan, especially how it relates to different land uses and servicing them. Related to that is, correct me if I'm wrong, David, concurrency.
And we don't have any.
Yeah. Concurrency means the services are in place at time of development. It's a very common policy to have for new development. And you have, usually it's in your public, it's in your utilities and services element, and your transportation element, and it's absent. It's a pretty important policy to have so that you can fall back when we say, developer, thou shalt provide this much open space. That's another one we'll come back to.
Or roads. Schools.
Water, sewer, etc. Where you have no policies in place currently today about concurrency. Let's go back to open space. Or recreation, open space. It's fairly weak. There's a lot of parts of your plan to talk about preserved open space, rural character, voluntary. Even a specific mention to, subdivisions of 50 lots or more should consider open space if they want to. That's really what it says, basically. And for a development of that size, you can certainly have a stronger policy to not just suggest it, but to require it.
So,
Go ahead.
on that note, is it based on the size of the development or just the number of houses? I mean, is it based on acreage or 50 units in a 2-acre area? Are they stacked on top of each other, or?
Usually it's based on number of lots created, but here's sometimes a problem with those policies and resulting code with them, is that someone comes in for a subdivision, they have this whole tract of land, and there's this really undevelopable, not very desirable piece of the property, and that's your new park.
Yeah.
That's your designated park. And a lot of times, there's no funding to improve the park. It's just this leftover piece that has really no other viable use that fulfills the requirements.
But that's why we ought to have the Parks Master Plan, is to lay out what parts of the county by policy ought to be preserved as open space and prevent that very sort of thing.
Well, in that situation, then when if if they're required to set aside land, why are they not at the same time required to provide the park?
It happens in a lot of municipalities. Idaho doesn't have the legislation to require it.
Why can't the county do that?
Because the Idaho state doesn't allow it at the moment.
But,
Well, let me back into it this way. In Colorado, for instance, we could require, and even in Texas, parkland or parkland, fee in lieu of parkland. Idaho's law doesn't allow a fee in lieu of, as I recall, unless I'm mixing it up. But, well, the takeaway is we can only start with where the state law is. I'm all for whatever we can go for. It's just that we haven't had any real political interest until lately. I think because of the tipping point lately, people are sort of getting full over too much development.
well, no, and then, but the state doesn't allow for it, but could the county not pass an ordinance?
We can as long as we're not in conflict with the state law.
Well, we don't know until we try, do we?
No, we don't. We just have to read the state law. I'm just a little fuzzy on that point at the moment. I've spent 4 hours a night for 30 days.
Well, no, and I understand, we discussed that, but I'm just saying.
That's something we can find in a few hours.
No, and I understand that, but I think it's something we need to look into. It's just like when we're building these subdivisions with roads that are 12 feet wide instead of, so you can't get a fire truck down the road. Right. Let's make them start building the roads so that we can get emergency vehicles down them no matter what the situation is. Right. So if we're gonna have a lot subdivision that's gotta have a park in it, let's make them put the park in, figure out how we're gonna do it. Let's figure out how we can get the developer to build it.
We can certainly go that path. The detail, the devil's in the details.
Yeah, no, I know. I just think it's something we need to look into instead of us the county having to foot the bill for it.
Right.
I think it's, let the developer pay for it. They want to build this, let the developer pay for it.
And maintenance.
And maintenance, yeah, it's like, you want to build it? Here's the bill. You take care of it. I don't want to pay for it.
I hear you, I agree.
No, I'm just saying.
We haven't had the political will until recently. We as the county.
Okay.
When I first started here, it was the reverse of everything you just said.
Well, it's time for a change.
That's the role of this body, is to advise.
Right. So that's why we're here.
Take a look, see.
Okay. Now, I mean, since it came out, we didn't say about this, but you can't, I mean, there's impact. That's very
right. And we've got some.
You do you have it for parks?
No. We opened up with fire.
Okay.
And we started with the cities looking at jails, but that got a little hung up in the politics of it. Also, that's on the back burner.
So only for fire and maybe for.
Then what's the other piece?
Yeah, we looked at parks also, but
But it didn't go anywhere.
it didn't go anywhere. The cities weren't willing to participate.
Right, because they saw it as a conflict with their parks. But just so you know, the cities all have their own priorities.
Yeah.
So that's not.
Yeah. Okay.
At the moment, we just have fire. We've been working on parks and jails, but that's stalled out for reasons with which I won't bore you. It's simple politics.
That requires a capital improvement plan as well,
We did all that.
Oh, okay.
We hired a consultant, and they did all the work, it's ready to go. You might as well know, the city's got hung up on it because the treasurer and them are in the lawsuit over arrears of money. The county owes the cities. And so it's a sort of, it's a part of the expression, the Yasser Arafat approach, where the city's just held us hostage over that issue. That's what I meant by pure and simple politics.
Okay. Moving on, some other findings just based on the topics of concern that we just kind of did a screen of the existing policies for. Friendliness, stability. What kind of zoning that could really, create. We, like I said, I had this question come up early in conference. I'm like, gosh, that's very interesting. I don't know what to do with it.
There are intentional neighborhoods.
Yes, you can create policies around community solidarity, right? Whether that's in a built environment or it's through programming such as events and that kind of thing. And policies around just stability with respect to how the county operates, right? I mean, there can be some things that maybe, yes.
You know, like I said before, you practically have to legislate civility nowadays. I mean, that's too bad. I mean, there's a lot of good people, don't misunderstand me, wonderful people, but I mean, there's some real horses rear ends you have to deal with too. And, just like what I said earlier today, the guys getting drunk on the back porch, shooting their guns all over the neighborhood, I mean, if there was some kind of a policy or a code or something like that for out in the rural areas of the county where you can't just indiscriminately shooting a gun off your back porch when you're drunk, I mean, that would help with the civility of the subdivision because then the neighbor wouldn't want to get his gun out and shoot back. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
The piggybacks we could use that as a springboard for would be things like a noise ordinance. We don't have a noise ordinance.
Yeah, there's no noise ordinance. And of course, then you have to have law enforcement agency that's willing to enforce some of this stuff.
Not necessarily. We could use sound meters.
Well,
if it's a violation of land use.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think there's a few things that we could do as far as creating homogeneity in the community where one neighbor can't be doing some doggone thing that's bothering a whole bunch of other people or something.
You have noise, you have other nuisance laws in place.
Right. Well, we don't. The state has one paragraph about what a nuisance is, but we don't have anything.
So maybe that's some policies.
That's a possibility.
Yeah. Right.
I had a neighbor out there that had 5 old Winnebagos and he was cooking meth in them. And one of them caught fire and that was the only, so then I got all of the sheriff's department and the fire department to put the fire out and then they found all the meth labs. And then we got that stopped.
Breaking Bad.
It's just crazy stuff like that.
I think though that if you did something, I'll just address the shooting. I know that might be an issue for your subdivision, but I can tell you a lot of people in the county where I live would be very upset if there was something like that put in place because they're in the county specifically on their acreage because they like to go shoot their guns. And they are cognizant of their neighbors and they're not doing it into their properties and they're watching the time and all of that, but that's the freedom that they have. And so that's where that balance comes in because now you're actually infringing on the right that they have on their own property and they're not infringing on anyone else's rights. So,
yeah, I'm not talking about, my brother has a shooting range on his property, it's all set up proper and everything.
Right.
I'm talking about these people having a wild party and just firing guns all over the place, that's what I'm talking about.
Drunken discharge of a firearm.
drunken disorderly.
Yeah.
And there's actually a law for that. It's
That much the sheriff can do.
yeah, intoxicated in possession of a firearm or intoxicated. It's against the law. But that's why people move to North Idaho, so they've got property and they can fire their firearm on their property. That's why you come to Idaho. Part of the reason.
Yeah, I'm not talking about responsible behavior, I'm talking about irresponsible behavior, so.
But you're gonna have that no matter where you go. I mean, all over.
Part of what came out of our group's conversation too about this topic was competition for scarce resources, making people who are maybe otherwise nice a little bit more irritable. And so maybe there's a way, if that's coming into play, and I can certainly see how it is. You know, you're on the road and it's way more crowded than it used to be here, whatever. But maybe that's a planning topic in terms of readiness. And we can anticipate what demand future growth might bring, or how we might want to manage growth so that we can influence the demand. You know, respond to the demand or influence the demand or find some way.
Yeah, I think today's example of, the DMV is a prime example of that. Do we have enough people working there, enough hours, whatever it takes to manage the
Volume.
yeah, because oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was telling our group when we first moved here, we just drove down, walked in, did it, left, no wait, no appointment. Not that way anymore.
So when Aaron and I were eating lunch, we were reflecting on the topical notes. And I don't know if you've had a chance to work through this, but this is a policy analysis thing that Aaron put together a couple of months ago. And so we spent some time combing through this and seeing how the topics and conversation that we brought up in our groups related to what you have on the books. And really, it at least tangentially touches on most of those things. But Aaron is bringing out a couple of things where it's silent or just weak. Mm-hmm. And I think so that's the kind of thing that's probably going to wind up being on your menu as you look at updating your comprehensive plan, is that you have some of these aspirations for 2045, but there are some real gaps in your policy to help you get there. And one of the things that Aaron is saying is that maybe there are some things we can take care of now that really don't require much of a change in policy, but maybe just a little bit more detail, or maybe just kind of reorienting a couple of things so that you can make the plan you have more effective. And then you can have the conversation about what you want to change in your plan to reflect new conditions today and what you think you want to achieve for tomorrow. And friendliness is a great example, because that irritability that you're sensing or feeling, is a result of an unanticipated crowd overburdening the systems. So how can you plan for systems for that growth that's coming down the line?
Right, yeah.
Or how do you plan for that growth so it doesn't overburden the systems you don't want to necessarily reinvest in?
And I think where we're at too now is that, again, because of our extreme growth during COVID, is we're still catching up. So it's not even an anticipatory thought. It's like, okay, how do we deal with the onslaught now?
How do you preserve farmland with all this growth pressure? That's one of the one that I kind of flag when I look at your implementing zoning, right? Your minimum lot size for the agricultural zone is 5 acres. Is that enough to preserve viable farmland? It might be a good block against some annexation. Cities may not be interested in a 5-acre annexation. I don't know, but is that enough to really preserve a viable agricultural economy? Because the zoning really is the implementation. The only exception is in the reservation after the last round of edits, right? That was a 10-acre minimum for there in the agricultural zone. So that's something that, because there's certainly a lot of language about farmland preservation and open space preservation and rural character preservation. There's a little bit of discrepancy from implementation, right? And you look at the zoning map here, and you can see some discrepancies from your future land use map. And we saw this when we looked at the Coeur d'Alene Reservation. It's pretty different. And so that's a conversation for later, but you know, this is vision, that's the implementation. And up here too, is it matching? There are some discrepancies in how that, and you know, in Idaho, unlike some other states we're looking like Washington, your future land use map doesn't have to match your zoning. It's the goals and policies that zoning must be in accord with. So the goals and policies really trump everything in Idaho. The state law says in LUPA, zoning shall be in accordance with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. So that's why it's important to really think about them, especially in Idaho, very carefully. So you have some decent policies for, so I would say it's the implementation aspect, again, that maybe there's a bit of discrepancy there. Maybe there's some specific action items that can help get you there, you know, probably for a later conversation. Those are big community conversations for later, probably, as we found out. Okay, and so I think the other main thing we're missing relates to water quality. Now there's a whole lot of stuff in there about preserving water quality and protecting the aquifer. What it doesn't talk about is aquifer recharge areas specifically, which you just kind of delineate. So that's another opportunity for a, you know, maybe a near term. Because it doesn't change the nature of the plan. There's a lot of strong, you know, considerations for the aquifer in the existing plan. Go ahead.
You know, the aquifer is really important. I don't want us to forget that we have other bodies of water that we need to protect as well. And mostly of that, like we talked about, is nutrient loadings to the lake. So we need to, I think everybody's going to focus, every time we say water, they're going to focus on the aquifer. But let's be sure that we also ensure that we deal with surface water runoff to the surface water bodies. You know, and mostly all that, like you and I were talking about, nutrient loadings, you know, it's either off of land activities or wildfire or sewers or something, you know, so, because without the surface water resources we have here, this isn't going to be as beautiful a place to come to if all the lakes are all polluted.
So we did not have time in our little lunch to go back and think about, you know, nutrient load. We talked a lot about it, and the policy analysis I did was just existing policies. Now we're looking for things that are missing. I guess that would be my question, maybe for you, Dave. Do we have? I mean, I know there's a lot of policy about water, you know, preserving water quality broadly, and I believe there's some for protecting surface water, but I can't think of any very strong policies that would give you the authority to adopt certain riparian standards or, you know, different setback standards, et cetera.
You're right.
There's a lot of voluntary, you know, so we heard from Jamie, and he's got, you know, a great booklet for property owners to, hey, here's some things you might consider. But is there any policies that would give the county teeth to require preservation of, you know, native vegetation, for example? Okay. And that's probably one of those for later things, because that would, you know, would just, you know, advertise a public hearing tomorrow, just push it through, probably some robust engagement policy creation around that. Anything else, based on the issues that we think where the comp plan maybe lacking a little bit, or be completely absent about from anyone? Bill, you included. Is there anything I'm missing there from your
That
notes?
zoning map dates back to the 70s, literally. And while, of course, we've made changes over time, they're incremental and small, and they don't address the simple facts that our major highways are 4 times as wide as they were when that was done. And that we really need to do a comprehensive relook at the entire zoning in the county.
Based on your existing future land use map or based
on new policy?
Yes. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that. That would all be, you know.
It's over 50 years old.
Yeah. I'm just saying that, you know, that would be the, for later, you know, enough.
But if we could sort of set the stage for it now so people are cognizant that it's time to be thinking about this.
You know, one thing that struck me, Aaron, as I was going through the county's policy is that it seems to focus on what we do today for today. It seems to maybe not talk about what we do today for tomorrow.
There's no long range to it.
So I think that might be a bit of a voice change.
Right.
That's a good point.
For us to think about in that plan.
Yeah.
Proactive instead of reactive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or just like taking care of business today for today's priorities. It's like I can understand the value in that, but I think there's maybe
it's short-sighted.
Well, and I think the population in the county is maybe demanding more of that than maybe they did when this comp plan was originally written.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, COVID was not in the crystal ball.
Yeah.
And, you know, I guess that, Aaron, it sounds like some of the, you know, detailed policy conversation we were maybe looking for today. We probably want to address with staff earlier on to do that, you know, real close screening of what some of the interrelationships are. And so maybe we can take some time, you said crystal ball, maybe we can break into our collective crystal ball here and maybe think about some of those influences that we see taking shape and maybe some surprises that we can just imagine we might have to encounter here later.
Good segue, Bill. Thank you.
So I think after we work with the planners and understand more about the intricacies of the policy interrelationship, then we might be able to propose what we can do now versus what needs to be done later. You know, then we can come back to the planning commission and say, okay, we've been reflecting on this. Here's stuff that we think, you know, makes it more effective, and here's stuff for reconsidering. And we can come back to you for that kind of a conversation. Mm-hmm. And then you can say, yep, that's something we feel comfortable moving forward on now, or that's something that maybe we should have a bigger public conversation about.
Okay. So influences, opportunities and challenges. Well, maybe you put some thought into this yourself on you. So, why this lake mean for now?
Go for it. We have photographic record.
Yeah.
And I think our group conversations came up with some thoughts about how our lessons from the recent past might shape our expectations for the near future. Are you using the eraser, Mr. Qualls?
I am.
Excellent.
You talked to this.
Looked like he was doing it
with just
with
his mitt.
his hand. Yeah.
Okay. So we came up with some, before we, a few days back, Bill and I came up with some thoughts about influences, changes. Obviously, in-migration is a big one. We've already covered that quite a bit. Bill, I'm going to lean on you a little bit here.
Okay, how about in-migration?
Smart.
Wildfire. Infrastructure replacement.
And some of this is a bit repetitive to our, issues identified. These are kind of, I think, more broader local, regional, and national trends. Things that we maybe even haven't thought about yet.
Electrification.
Yeah, electrification. Let's talk a little bit about that one, Bill.
EVs, data centers, increasing demand being placed on our electrical grid and what that might mean for transforming our behavior.
We're putting a stop to EVs.
Or even micromobility, electric bikes. We've been spending a ton of time in Southern California, and they are all over the place.
We did a pathways plan for Chelan County, and it was really interesting because that was it was a couple years ago now, and we really tried to acknowledge that trend in micromobility, how, and you think about compared to a regular bicycle, e-bike or scooter, you go a lot farther and a lot faster, and it kind of, with that trend in mind, we thought, well, geez, we're kind of designing a sort of, it's another highway system throughout the county, to if you're familiar with Chelan County, Lake Chelan, there's Wenatchee, there's
Columbia River.
Well, there's Leavenworth, and it was kind of like this micromobility highway, grade separated pathways all throughout, and part of the thinking. And I mean, we started to talk about that early on, and the public works director came with this picture of a tiny smart car on this pedestrian bridge. It's like, what do you do with that? And everybody's still trying to figure that out. So that is I think it's a fascinating potential trend as you think about transportation, maybe a little bit differently in certain areas.
And judging from some of our COVID experiences, like supply chain resilience.
Ooh, nice.
And then a related thing to that is local food production.
One of the things we haven't talked about at all is air traffic, guys. How busy is the airport going to get it? I mean, my brother's place is in the flight path now. He never was before. And he's got jet aircraft flying over his house constantly. Private jets, of course. And I don't know how much more busier than the airport can get, you know what I'm saying?
You got a commercial airport 40 miles away and use it.
Yeah, but they're not using it. See, the problem with air traffic is you've got commercial, and then you've got, other aviation. And that's why we're having a lot of conflicts. We almost had another terrible accident this last week with a passenger jet and a private jet. So,
There's no commercial air service.
Commercial
Yes.
versus.
There's not, it's a general aviation here.
But, I mean, you're right. I think the current plan is a little light, and even your future land use map on airport considerations. That's the required component of a comp plan. And ITD, Aeronautics Division, has a big book about airport land use guidelines. And anecdotally, I've heard that there's been some conflicts with the airport and development out by the airport.
Yeah,
And what's called intercritical zones, they call them in the land use guidelines, and maybe not the best place for density. Not that that hasn't happened, at airports throughout time, and it's an inhibitor to further development of the airport, and it's a public safety concern. So we'll put on here, yeah, air traffic as a trend, and probably something that's a little deficient in the future land use map, you know, just for, you know, or just showing what, for that class of airport, where those critical areas would be, so that it's like aware.
Something that came up in our conversations too, maybe not directly, but indirectly, was also out migration of our younger generation.
About automation.
Is there any possibility we'll ever get any manufacturing here?
Athel's a good place for it.
Huh?
Athel's a good place for it.
Well, what I'm saying is, though, some kind of a company moves in here. I mean, to be able to employ all these young people we want to keep around.
When you say manufacturing, would you be willing to broaden it to wealth creating?
Yeah, it would create jobs.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Wealth creating is a broader term than just manufacturing.
Yeah, just some kind of, it could be electronics industry, it could be
a
just.
number of things, as long as it's job related and wealth creating.
Yeah,
So that's certainly the kind of thing a comp plan can address.
yeah, because I don't know how much longer we can be a recreation community, a community for old people to die in, and whatever, you know, stuff like that.
I would throw that around. The whole purpose of a comp plan is to be aspirational.
Yeah.
If you all as a body think that's what's important, let's address it.
In other words, in our comp plan, should we be doing something to offer things to potential or companies that would come here to produce a product of some kind? And then, if we did that, do we have enough transportation facilities to either bring in the raw materials and outsource the product that's produced here? So you're gonna haul it on trains, trucks, or whatever. So.
And figuring out why it's not here now. Figuring out why it's not here now.
Right.
Yeah. See that?
Spokane Valley is doing.
So what, you know? Well, when I moved here, we had 2 Kaiser aluminum plants in the area, 7 sawmills in Coeur d'Alene.
One thing I think I don't know, I'm always trying to think of how the dots all connect. Quality of life is a huge economic development strategy, right? And recreation and recreational offerings, and that's often linked with an economic development strategy. I want to say that, I guess I'm kind of going back to, what may be missing, what can be shored up, goes back to Parks and Recreation. I didn't see a lot in there that considers Parks and Recreation as an economic development strategy.
Right. That was done.
Just something to maybe think about further. But certainly a pros plan, we look at that. Because it's certainly a proven economic development strategy. There's organizations like Headwaters Economics that does a whole lot of data analysis about, the linkage between economic development and recreation.
Well, one of the reasons that the Boise Treasure Valley blew up was because Micron moved in there with huge plants, both on the east end of Boise and out between Boise and Nampa. And I lived in Meridian, and it was 7,300 people, and now it's 100,000. I mean, 30 years. So, I mean, there's, the metro area is probably 600,000 or 700,000 people down there now. So, I mean, but that's because the electronics industry moved in there.
Is that what we want to do?
So,
His question was, is that what we want it to be?
Boise. Do we want to be lazy?
Well, if you
I don't
want
think we want to
to,
be.
you want to keep the kids home. And you want to
Right.
have,
It's up to
and you
you.
want to have,
It's a balance.
jobs, for people to make enough money to live here. Or do you want to be like Aspen or, Sun Valley, where the minimum wage in Sun Valley is a couple million a year or something like that. It is, I used to work up there, yeah.
For minimum wage.
Depends on what you want here.
Yeah. it's- All right, any other influences or trends that we may want to think about? Just to kind of set us up for the broader conversation today.
I think maybe not so much over the aquifer, but outside of the aquifer, just the availability of water.
Yeah.
I think water is becoming a
Good point.
Yeah,
hot topic.
hot topic globally, right?
Yeah.
If water runs out in other places, and that kind of relates back to in-migration, right? And there's been hazard mitigation studies, I'm gonna say that, if Seattle falls into the sea, where are people gonna go? But yeah, so we put in definitely water availability. Were you thinking more like broadly water availability, like outside of the county, or just?
I was thinking within the county, but
One thing I know that you guys know Sam Wolkenheimer, he talks a lot about demographic shifts and what happens when the largest generation starts to expire. And, so there's some demographic questions that may have impacts in the future as well. He can talk more articulately about than I can. I'm gonna put that on here.
Wealth transfer.
Ooh, yeah. That's very true.
And wealth disparity is part of that.
Maybe we should have a fee on the interstate for Washingtonians coming to Kootenai County recreate.
Yeah.
Kind of already do. State parks charges a surcharge for non-Idaho residents.
The Wasatch Front, Salt Lake, Ogden area, 20 years ago, the Forest Service put gates on all the roads leading out of those cities into the national forest, and they're charging people to enter the national forest now because there were so many, they couldn't accommodate them. We actually put that into effect, a gate system on the roads into the national forest. And then we used that money to fix things up in the woods, but still.
How many of them got tore down?
None. They did. And the reason for that is they just couldn't accommodate 1 million people going into the woods all at the same time. It was impossible. But it was a real controversial thing to do.
Do we think that the fiscal conversation is going to get more pronounced?
Yes,
How we match our revenues with
Yeah.
our costs?
and it needs to, because it is woefully disparate.
So maybe that's another influence.
I wonder if some policy showing up, and we can hash this out with Dave and Ben. The fiscal balance. Whether or not that's a near-term thing to think about or later, fiscal concerns. Maybe to the degree we can, we start looking at things like concurrency and things to maybe shore up future actions to protect county taxpayers to the degree possible from new growth.
without necessarily changing robustly the nature of the plan. I don't know, it's just a thought. We can work on that surgically together later before we come back with something to deliver to the planning commission.
I don't know the answer to this question. But how much of the workforce in Kootenai County is federal? And how is that changing in terms of revenue into the county?
Did you know
The
that?
federal workforce in Kootenai County is not bad.
It's relatively small.
Yeah, it's relatively small. You've got the Forest Service, the BLM, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and then, you know, they have that new joint office out at the nursery, and you got the person that work at the nursery, and, you got a few
But
people.
local government is far and away.
Oh, yeah, it's way bigger, local government. The federal, I mean, there aren't any big, huge offices here or anything, So you might see out of this latest purge, 20 or 30 people lose their jobs, something like that, here, for what's happening right now.
Okay. Anything else? Big trends? It's a pretty good list.
It's a good list.
Tourism? Where?
Change in tourism,
Well, it's,
pretty consistent, isn't it?
it is, and it's our largest economic engine, but we don't really address it in that way. So it seems like that's something to consider.
And tribal sovereignty?
As a trend, is it something to watch?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it seems like it's becoming more and more topical in national policy.
How long are we gonna sell recreation here before we saturate? I mean, you can walk on Courtland Lake across the boats, you know? It's you're talking to the sheriff's department about that, oh boy.
We issue more citations than any other place in the state, and we have more boat traffic than any other place in the state.
And the resort's about to get bigger.
Well, and Post Falls is getting bigger, we just gave them their new permit.
They just had that breakfast down there, didn't they, with the new marine or whatever.
Yeah, 19.
Past that, yeah.
19? I think it was 19. Stand around?
Yeah, Post Falls is projected to double.
What's that?
Post Falls is projected to double from 50 to 100,000 in 20 years.
How many of those are actually Idaho residents working in Idaho versus living here but actually working, just going across the border? Washington.
Currently,
You just know those numbers, yeah, currently, do we know?
people currently live there, how many are the actual work in Washington and live in
Right,
Post
yeah,
Falls? It's a
yeah.
good question. I'm not sure. Do you know?
I kind of do, but it's 5 years old.
Oh, yeah.
I did an analysis that showed how many people were living and working in Post Falls, and the number was actually quite a bit higher than I thought it was. I thought that Post Falls was still largely a bedroom community for Spokane Valley, but that's not the case. And it looks like there are lots of other people from northern Idaho who commute to Post Falls to work. So there is still a significant employment base in Post Falls that's serving Idaho residents.
Why'd you ask, Tammy?
I guess I just assumed, and driving back and forth to go to the airport or something else, it just seems I see a lot of those people from Post Falls getting on the freeway, from those housing developments and going into Spokane.
Yeah, it's still there. It's still there.
Look at how many Spokane police cars are enforced laws in Coeur d'Alene, because they drive back and forth to Coeur d'Alene.
I have two that live across from me in North Eden.
Yeah.
I sort of wonder about the reverse of those just because of the tax structure, like there's no income tax in
Right.
Washington. Well, it may benefit some people. There are other taxes, but no income tax. There's income tax in Idaho. So I know that some maybe have a second home and spend just under half the time there in North Idaho, but they're residing in Washington. All right. Well, David's starting to nod off, so. I think this is some good work, and we're looking forward to coming back with some strategic tweaks for now, and then some ideas for later. And we'll work with you guys on that. Maybe come back in 2 or 3 weeks with that. If that sounds okay. Yeah.
Aaron, if I would propose maybe an approach, would be to go through the existing plan and comb through it for implementation action items.
Yeah.
And pull those out of the policy framework and put them into an implementation table.
Yeah.
And then look at optimizing the policy you've got without necessarily changing direction. And then building that menu of things that really need to be on the radar screen for the comp plan amendment. So maybe like a three-step deal.
Are you saying like maybe incorporate an implementation matrix based on whatever change we make now?
I would say based on what's on the books today.
Yeah.
And vet it because some of those things may already be accomplished or just irrelevant today.
Yeah.
So there's a fresh sheet of things to do.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. Okay. Anything else, Madam Chair?
What's your timeline for wanting more input from us?
So, you mean, is it twice a month?
But, well, it depends on what available.
Yeah.
Workshops we can move into too.
Okay. Well, give us about a month to, get you that. Let's say roughly about a month from now, we'll get you the deliverables ahead of time, and then we would love some consolidated feedback on those. And it's really going to come down to what you're comfortable with tackling now, what you think should be advised for later, and then what kind of implementation things can we draft to move the needle forward on some specific actions, even in the near term, for the near term specifically.
Well, keep in touch with us so we can schedule.
Yeah.
Spring's coming. It's getting nice outside.
I know. It's pretty nice right now.
Look for a crappy day.
Okay.
Just thinking.
Go for rain.
Yes.
So David and Ben, other than the meeting, the hearing on the 17th, do we have any other pending issues that we should be looking at in between?
Still plugging away on the overlay zones for the setbacks. So that's probably, I think, the next thing we'll have available for you.
So
But
that would be May or
hopefully before that, but we'll see. Yeah.
It's a little hard to predict when you don't have designated staff. We're taking away from their regular duties to fill the gap.
so as far as you know, we don't have anything pending that we need to schedule.
Not other than what he's already talked about.
Yes. We're adjourned.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you bet.
Eric.